Good evening and welcome to the December 1st, 2014 Long Meadow Select Board meeting. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to start with announcements. Does anyone have any announcements tonight? Is this coming Saturday?
This coming Saturday, so good luck to them.
Go ahead and announce it.
Okay, just good luck to the Lancers on their championship game on Saturday
At Gillette Field?
at Gillette Stadium. Yeah.
Okay.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock?
11 o'clock.
Thank you.
If I don't know where there's information about transportation. Is there?
Fan bus for students, I don't think that's available to the general public.
Okay.
Even if we ask nicely.
Contact the administration.
Okay. Any more announcements? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to resident comments. Do we have any resident comments tonight? Richard?
I do have one. While he's going, I just one announcement. Now that we've had our first snowfall, we do want to remind people about clearing the bylaws about clearing their sidewalks
Okay.
and fire hydrants within, I think, 24 hours of a snowstorm.
Okay.
So I just want to issue that annual reminder.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Richard Lyons, 608 Frank Smith Road. Tonight, you're going to be looking at the tax rate for the fiscal year coming up. Last year, a couple of things happened here that kind of bothered me. I proposed a question as to the way that they assessed the homes and the businesses. And the only response that we seemed to get was, oh, it wouldn't be fair to do it to the businesses the same as they do it to the homes. We have a other formula for doing it, and it was dead at that. They never told you what that is. I think it's your privy to look at stuff like that and see how they're doing it. I keep hearing in the town that we don't have much land for expansion or anything like that. So if you put all that together, maybe the taxpayers are subsidizing the business if they're giving breaks because, oh, they need it. Well, I'd like to see a lot more business in here to get our tax rate down, but we don't have the room for it. So let's not just say, oh, that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Any other resident comments? Could you please state your name and address?
Good evening. Noah Rosen, 19 Quinnetuck Road. We ask that we give our comments and have a cordial conversation about Quinnetuck Road when it comes up in the agenda. Is that possible? To save the comments till then?
Yeah, I'd say so. If we have a relatively minor amount of group that wants to talk, but not a major amount.
No, it's probably going to be myself.
Okay.
I'll talk on behalf of the street, and we can just kind of discuss the report and your thoughts and our thoughts.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, no. Any other resident comments? Select board comments? Paul?
I have a couple. I think it was last meeting we had or at least at our finance subcommittee meeting, I think here as well, that the net metering credits, a project that we had invested in, are coming in well above what our estimates were, and I think it was $12,000, and we're at a pace to, I think, quadruple that for the year. I'd like to see if we could possibly have a discussion at a future select board meeting if we are going to adopt the Energy Committee as a subcommittee, that we take a look at the possibility of taking those net metering credits and instead of putting them into the general fund, look at them for energy projects that could save the town some money. In other words, this is unexpected and unanticipated, and I know the chief financial officer is going to monitor it to see if it keeps going at the pace that it is, and if it does, there might be an opportunity to parlay that into some energy-type projects that we might not normally fund through the general fund or town meeting. The other issue, or other thing is, and we're going to talk about the bands, but I have a question about the North Intercept when that comes out. There's an announcement that the money from MGM for the casino mitigation will be coming in, $875,000 or so. And what I'd like to also ask is a potential future agenda item is if there's a will by the board to set up something along the lines of a casino mitigation trust where there's going to be projects that we need to do, and then there's going to be anticipation or other issues that are going to come up that we know that we're anticipating that weren't necessarily addressed in the mitigation process, and things like DUIs and those types of things. And once that money hits, we seem to have a tendency to spend it, and potentially, excuse me, if it was possible to look at setting something where that money goes into a fund that is spent specifically to mitigate casino issues. Next, I have a question on the Quint truck. I know it's passed and everything, but and if it's something that you can get back to me, it doesn't have to be. It was brought to my attention that someone asked us at town meeting after the vote, so it didn't. But where there are power lines, and maybe we can talk about this offline, but where the Quint is able to go and not go and so forth, but maybe we'll just do that offline. And the next question I have was a couple months ago, we met with the joint meeting of the school committee to talk about an interview for the IT advisory board, and at that time we were told there weren't any meetings, there was an attempt to have one, there was no quorum. And the question I have is, since then, and I don't need an answer tonight, but maybe for the next meeting, is that since that point in time, has there been a committee meeting? If not, I think the board needs to take some sort of action, because that committee was actually a key component to us forming an IT director which oversaw the town and the schools' IT budgets and issues that we have in planning. And that committee was supposed to come back and be our eyes and ears for IT, make recommendations. And if they're not meeting, we haven't had a report on it. We haven't had a report from IT, so to speak. I think we need to at least look into what we can do and get that committee either jump-started or take a look as, do we need it if they're not meeting? That's it.
Okay, you want to do the Quint offline, Paul?
Yeah, we'll talk about
Okay.
it. 'Cause there's
Are
just a
you
question.
prepared to offer a motion on the energy subcommittee?
No, I just said if we're going to have, because that was going to come back as a discussion for the board to adopt it.
Okay.
But maybe at that time, we can talk about this money that's coming into, if there's projects that are coming on down the road that aren't necessarily need to be funded by general fund. I mean, if we have a surplus in something that was unanticipated like
Right,
that.
so this
that-
time you're just asking for an agenda item?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and the agenda item for the formation of the trust on the MGM and the Quint trucks offline, and the joint meeting of the school board on the tech committee, is that going to be resolved tonight?
I mean, we tried when we were talking about the Wi-Fi
Okay.
to get them together,
Right,
and it just.
okay.
Well, I didn't need an
I know
answer
they.
tonight. I was just asking if
I
we
don't
could
think
follow
they've
up on
met.
it.
I need to start pushing them again. I think in the new year,
Okay.
we will push on them again to kind of get them together. But this is a long. It's been many years.
Right.
So
Okay.
we'll try and
Okay.
get them going.
Any other select board? Paul, or excuse me, Alex?
Yes, this is kind of directed toward people in the audience and people who may be watching. At our last meeting, Mr. Foster made reference to a long list of resident concerns about the town meeting vote. I just want to clarify something. That list does not exist in any sort of literal sense, at least if it does, it was never presented to the select board. What was presented to the select board was a timeline prepared by the town clerk and 2 letters by 2 separate vote counters. I don't believe those materials are on the town website yet. I think they ought to be, and I'm sure will be, like the rest of our meeting minutes. I'm going to be putting those documents on my website, which is alexgrantlongmeadow.org, so that people can be clear about what exactly we had before us and what we did not, because sort of the exact scope of what was brought before us, what was rumor, what was hearsay, I'm sure, I don't believe has ever quite been clarified.
Okay, and I understand your personal website is your personal website and has no bearing on board activities or any actions officially taken by this board. And we said there was a list of people. We can correct that as a list. There was people that reported. I had 2, and there were several accounts on other people. There wasn't any attempt on the chair's part to manufacture any information other than what was known. I guess, Stephen, you had reports, and the town clerk had reports, and I know 2 school board members reported. So there was a sizable amount of people that said they thought something was going on. But so noted. Any other comments? Okay. Select board comments, town manager report.
Thank you. Just so I'm just finishing making a note here. I can't write and talk at the same time. So to build on Paul's point, we have to fill out some paperwork that we're working on, but we should be in receipt of the initial $850,000 upfront mitigation payment this week from MGM. And as I noted in my report, the funds must be used. We have the agreement, the relationship between MGM and the town of Long Meadow is governed by our surrounding community agreement, which essentially amounts to a contract between the 2 parties. And according to that document, the funds must be used to specifically address the traffic and roadway infrastructure impacts that have been studied and determined by the community, an independent peer review undertaken by Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and the Commission's independent consultants. And those who have been watching that, or who were watching that process, know that those 3 entities, excuse me, focused really on the signalized intersections on Long Meadow Street, particularly close to the Springfield line. And so that'll obviously be the focus of making improvements to those intersections are obviously the focus of that upfront payment. That was clear in our arbitration decision. The town will also be receiving $275,000 annually from the.
Can I stop you 1 minute?
Yep.
I need to request either we suspend or I get a waiver on the tax classification hearing. Mark just mentioned it was scheduled for 7:10, and I don't know who
Just
can approve.
30 seconds, I'll be done.
I move the tax classification here be suspended until after the town manager's reports.
Is there a second on that motion?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. Go ahead, Steve. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. So so that money will be coming. We are already preparing to look at an engineering scope of work for the traffic signals and the intersections. So that will be ongoing. The $275,000 annual payment, which is subject to a 2.5% annual increase, we won't receive until they open their doors. So it'll be it'll be 2 years before we see the money, but it'll probably be, I would guess, minimally 2, but possibly 3 budget cycles before we would see that as a source in our annual budget. And similarly, under our agreement, traffic and public safety concerns were the primary reason why we were awarded the money in arbitration. So that, again, will be the focus. So, like I said, the 850 is coming this week, and then the other money will come in a few years. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, any questions, town manager, on this report?
Yeah, just there were 2 other items on the written report, Stephen. I was just going to ask about just one of them. It was it was the issue of capital planning. I'd gotten a note from somebody on the capital planning committee trying to find out when they would get the information sent to them, and you said it was being prepared. Do you have a date for sending that to the capital?
The goal is to get to by the end of this week.
Okay.
I mean, we have.
If you can just let the chair know so they can start scheduling
I will. I do
meetings,
need to touch base. I mean, truthfully, we have the applications in, the documentation, the backup. We have the backup material for the capital planning applications now have actual estimates from engineers or architects, not just back of the envelope quotes from vendors. So that you'll notice when you see the materials that there's a lot more backup material. We're really just dotting T's and crossing the I's on the upfront applications, but they should get it very soon.
Yeah, I'm just saying, because they wanted to know
Yeah.
what the schedule, schedule meeting.
And I guess I have one comment. This initial money is earmarked, per se, for the improvements, but the future money that comes in will, and I guess that if we form this MGM trust fund or whatever and get a committee going, then they will direct that money so that it does not fall into the general fund and just become invisible.
Well, I mean the functions, the functions that will be paid, that will be done, like the whatever operationally we need to do to offset the impact of the casino, gets paid out of the general fund.
Right.
Police overtime, jail monitors, additional paving, I mean, whatever the stuff we talked about all that time, that all gets paid out of the general fund by and large. So having the funds come into the general fund is appropriate from an accounting standpoint.
Right.
But you're right, our annual budget has to reflect that these funds are to be used for the issue, to address the issues that we said, which, like I said, it's, and I don't know if the folks watching at home, it's been a while since we've talked about it, but we made our case on impacts based on traffic and public safety impacts.
Right.
We did not make a case based on, say, impact to commercial development or additional burden for our health inspector or our building inspector. Those weren't arguments that we felt would resonate with an arbitration panel, and it turns out they wouldn't have. So using those funds to get additional hours for the building department isn't one of the things that would maybe eligible. Now, if it turns out we do have an impact, we certainly could go back and document that, and there is still a modified look-back provision, but
Right.
no, by and large, it's public safety and transportation
I
traffic.
guess what I wanted to do is, like Mr. Santinella mentioned, somehow assure the public that this money just won't be dumped in the general treasury. There's going to be some thought process put into this money, because this is for casino mitigation impacts on our community, as we felt there would be. So there'll be a lot more thought put into it.
They may give it to us in chips, though. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, well, that's true, and we can take our chances.
Yeah, we could probably turn it into more.
Okay.
Or less.
Yeah, or less. Any other questions, Town Manager? Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and call it the tax classification hearing. Bob, you want to come on up?
Okay. I think Robert Leclerc, Principal Assessor. The purpose of the classification hearing is to decide, the Select Board has the opportunity to decide if they want to have a single tax rate for all classes of property. The Finance Director and I have gone through the process of estimating expenses and revenues and so forth. Our office has estimated the value of all real and personal property, and based on the amount of money that we can raise on the tax levy, the assessors have calculated that the new tax rate will be $23.76. And this is an increase of 61 cents from last year's tax rate. The classification allows us to raise that $45 million tax levy by apportioning equally based on the value of property to all owners of real and personal property. What classification does is says you're allowed to have the commercial and industrial property and the personal property pick up a greater portion of that $45.5 million by having their tax rate be higher than for residential property. Traditionally in Long Meadow, we've had roughly 95% of our value has been in the residential rate. As a result of that, for every penny that we would lower the residential tax rate, the $23.76, if we lowered it a penny, what the effect would be to increase the commercial property owner's tax rate by 24 cents. So we could lower the residential property tax rate by as much as 68 cents but by doing so, we would increase the commercial property tax rate by just shy of $12. Now, how does that impact the average residential assessed property? If you did a 1% shift and lowered the tax rate by a penny, for the year, you would lower that average property owner's bill by $3.27. And at the same time, you would increase the average commercial property owner's tax bill by $429. So that's the impact at the minimum or the least amount that you could make a shift. At the extreme other end, you would lower the the average value of a residential property. You would lower their taxes by about $222, and at the same time raising the average commercial property owner's taxes for the year by $21,000. So because of the small percentage of value in our commercial and industrial and personal property, there's a significant impact by making any shift. But that's the purview of the select board, is to decide if they want to make that shift. And I able to answer any questions, specific questions you have, or I could elaborate on some of the changes. Our total value increased very little from last year. I think it was something like on the order of the aggregate value was 0.3% increase. There's some little up and down in the different categories, and we could get into that detail. But like I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Can I ask about, sure. When you're talking about the value up from last year, is that with the new assessments or the group that we had going out there and doing the triannual evaluation?
Well, it's kind of a mix of everything. It's a combination of building permits, adding value, building permits, demolition of property, raising property, lowering value, and it includes that inventory of property, that sort of the accounting of the audit of whether our inventory is correctly categorized in our files, in our data. So it includes if we had a mismeasurement on a property that increased the value, or we changed the condition of a property because of that inspection. All of that is included in there. There is a form where we try to allocate the percent increase on the revaluation that is different from the change in value due to the growth. And actually, I think on the revaluation, I think a lot of the residential property values decreased, but then we picked that up with the growth and the any corrections that we made from the inspection of property.
Okay, so that's a yes. That's the most recent value that we're coming up with. This is
everything
what we just did.
Yes, it's all in there.
Thank you. That was just.
Any other questions? Seeing no questions, I guess we'll call for a motion to accept.
No.
Does anybody else want to speak at the hearing?
Oh, excuse me. Would anyone like to speak at the hearing? Yes, sir. Come on up to the mark, please.
We have to close the hearing.
Yeah, thank you. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Attilio Carteropoli. I live at 36 Willow Circle in Longmeadow, and I'm the general manager of Twin Hills Country Club. And this would, if this reclassification were to pass, it would have a dire impact on the country club. As you know, Twin Hills was pretty much going to go bankrupt. It was going to fall and probably go into residential development. I've invested quite a bit of money into the premises, and my financial plan was based on what my expenses are, and by going up on the classification, my tax bill would be about $48,000 to $50,000 a year more. and I think it would have a devastating impact on what I'm trying to do at the country club. So I would hope that you would consider the impact it has on a business like mine.
Yes, go ahead.
I just have a question for Mr. Carteropoli. We're here, so far the only thing we've heard from our principal assessor is a recommendation to make a unified tax rate across the board. And I understand that Twin Hills Country Club, I believe, got an abatement prior based on their taxes, but nothing we're being asked to do at this point has anything to do with anything other than creating a unified tax rate for across the entire town. Unless, Mr. Leclerc, I misunderstood what the recommendation is of the Board of Assessors, which is to set a tax rate at 2376. That's based on the amount of money the town has to raise. Anything short of that, we're in a deficit funding situation. The purpose of tonight's tax classification hearing is to determine if we want to do something other than the recommendation of the Board of Assessors, and that is to create a tax rate that may be different for commercial versus residential, which my understanding may or may not impact Twin Hills Country Club because you're not considered a commercial property at this point. You're an open use or some other classification. But I don't think that this impacts your establishment at all at this point.
Well, I hope you're right.
I don't know. Bob?
Your clarification?
It would impact Mr. Carteropoli.
Because?
No, I think you're miscommunicating here. The recommendation of the assessors will not affect anybody, other than what they're recommended, meaning.
That's what I thought, Paul.
Okay. And actually, the only thing you misspoke about is that whatever action we take does not increase revenue, does not decrease revenue.
Right.
Whatever action we take to adjust rates, if we ever did do that, is just, it's revenue neutral, but it adjusts the rate, so I'm just.
Right.
Richard, no.
Go ahead.
So, in essence, he's speaking in favor of the assessor's recommendation is the takeaway of the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, Mr.
Carteropoli.
Cardiopoli,
Yeah.
did I say that right?
Yeah.
No, let me
Okay.
help you with that, Scotteropoli.
Carteropoli. All right. So, what classification do you have? What is your? I mean, because we're looking at residential, commercial, industrial. Which
I'm under the impression that I'm commercial.
you're commercial.
Mr. Pacers, yes.
Okay, Mr. Preser, is that right, Paul? Yeah. He's commercial. Okay, and you're saying that it would be could you do you mind elaborating on that? Like, why would it be devastating?
Well, golf courses are all in deep financial trouble, and we're trying to turn the place around. We've invested quite a bit of money, and if there's a reclassification with the valuation of the property, the impact on the club would be somewhere around $48,000 to $50,000 additional tax burden.
Based on what numbers?
The Twin Hills Country Clubs is presently assessed just over $4 million.
So
The
that's
tax
based on a
rate,
1%
the
shift or a 5%
no.
shift or a 50% shift?
Well, the residential, at the residential rate, my tax bill is going to be about $80,000, $85,000. If I was reclassified for commercial and you have an additional $11 or just under $12 additional,
That's the worst case, yeah.
with those figures, I'd be paying about $40,000 to $50,000 more every year.
That's assuming a 50% shift in, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Well, that's what,
Okay, I just didn't know what the numbers you were based on. It assumes a 50% shift
yes.
in value. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Any other statements from the public? Yes, ma'am. You were through, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Attorney Carmina Fernandez. I'm also the president of the East of the River Five-Town Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a Board of Selectmen in the town of Ludlow, and I was here last year for the same purpose, to inform you that the town of Ludlow did try opting for anything other than the single tax rate, and it didn't do very well. What happens is, when you have towns where the residents versus the businesses, the ratio is still so small, where you have a lower business ratio, you impact the businesses greatly. The businesses are actually a benefit to our towns at this time because they're paying taxes, but they're not using our schools, our police, our safety complexes. So, and they pay taxes not only on the real estate, but they pay taxes on their personal property, so trucks, equipment, and all of that. And I can tell you that we tried it. We thought it would be a better way to go besides the single tax rate, and it didn't work for us. And we have more businesses than you do at this time. You have a special situation where you're located, where a business could easily move to East Long Meadow or Enfield, and you'd lose jobs and potential tax base, and that wouldn't help the residents because it just would increase their taxes because they now have to. Somebody has to pay the taxes that those businesses were paying and not using for the benefits that the town provides. So I'm here just to let you know that we tried it. It didn't work for us, and it probably wouldn't work for you as well. So I hope you'll consider that. And I strongly recommend that you take the assessor's recommendation. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay. Any more statements from the general public? See no statements, we'll move to close the hearing.
Just in the packet is the Greater Springfield Chamber, the affiliated Chambers of Commerce of Greater Springfield did submit something for the hearing record.
Okay. Okay. We have a motion to close the hearing?
Moved.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor? All opposed? Done. Go ahead, Paul.
I'd like to just speak for a moment. It's funny because this is my 9th year on the board, and every year, and businesses provide a convenience in Long Meadow. They don't provide a service because it's just more convenient to go to CVS here or Big Y here than it is to go to East Long Meadow. So, and quite frankly, to argue with you a little bit, Attorney Fernandez, our businesses get their doors checked every night when they close up by our police officers. They don't do that to my home. So there are some things that they draw upon. They have water lines that are phenomenally larger than what I have in my home. And that water line has to be maintained in the same way that my water line does or your water line does at home. And for 9 years, I've heard the same thing, that you can't tax a business any higher because it doesn't make any difference. And I think the argument is flawed in many different levels. And when we did this, we had this assessor's report at our last meeting. The average home has gone down in the last 4 years for a value of $350,000, and this is in the assessor's report, to a value of $326,000 in this year's assessor's report. So when we say that it would affect businesses, quite frankly, it affects our town as well. Our homeowners as well. And as someone who has a business in the town of Long Meadow, I know that those things would affect me as well. But what I want to stress is that I'm willing to make a motion to actually adjust this tax rate, because I believe it's time that we give our homeowners a break. And because we are 95% residential, and if you think about that for a minute, we're 95% residential, and the burden is definitely on the homeowners. Businesses are assessed at a far different level than what homeowners are. The value of a building that's over at the shops or in Big Y Plaza is not the same as it is a value if your home was comparable with the same number of square feet. And I've sat down with Mr. Leclerc and argued with him about this over time. It is the way it is. It's based on their rental income. It's based on a number of factors. I believe that homeowners deserve a break. And that's who I'm elected by. That's who I will bend to on this. And I would like to make a motion to have a tax rate of $23.08 for residential and $35.64 for commercial.
Second. Second one then.
Mr. Grant seconded.
Okay, second on the motion. Discussion? Marie?
I don't think you're really giving the taxpayers that much of a break, and I think it ends up hurting the small businesses in town. And a lot of those small businesses are owned by Long Meadow residents who are voters. if we really want to look, and I think we have to sit down and look at how we're going to bring down our tax rate, because we're starting to hit the ceiling from what I understand. And I think the better way to do it, rather than looking at the split tax rate, is for us to really maybe talk to our finance committee about looking at what other towns are doing, which is enterprise funds for stormwater, improvements in drainage. It's a big problem in town. It's multi-million-dollar projects every year. And I think that would be something we could really ask to start to do a true investigation and see if we can bring down the tax rate for everybody and bring this in. And then large organizations that do have a lot of pavement and cause increase in our drainage projects would be paying towards these projects. So I think instead of just taking something which I think would only be a token relief for taxpayers, we should really ask our finance committee to sit down and look at what we could do in putting in together an enterprise fund, at the same time seeing if that could bring down the tax rate for everyone. So I'd say let's look at the bigger picture rather than just try to do something small here, which I think will hurt residents, will hurt businesses, and not really give the residents the break that they really need.
Okay. Can I just follow up with a question?
Sure.
Could you elaborate? I think I'm understanding a little bit what you're saying. I guess I didn't quite get it, how an enterprise fund would result in tax relief. Could you just sort of flesh that out?
Well, I'm asking for us to investigate to see if it could, because right now we're taking those projects and we're putting them directly under the general fund. And some of these projects, the William Street, Merriweather, that was all drainage issues. As our previous town manager said, Long Meadow's built on sand. And all of these projects are coming down the pike, and they're serious projects. And other towns are realizing that stormwater is very expensive. They've come out with new rulings that is going to increase the cost to the town. I say if we do want to look at tax relief, let's see if we can bring it down a little bit at the same time we develop these enterprise funds. I'm not sure if it's possible, but I think it's worth maybe tasking our finance committee or our town manager to look at it to see if we do put something in, will that help bring up the tax relief? Because this would be money that we're now paying out of general fund, and this will be coming. So just like you pay a water bill, you pay a sewer, you'd be paying for stormwater. So it's a new concept in town. I know that Northampton has it, Westfield has it, Chicopee has it, and other towns are looking at it because it is a serious issue. And then you would have other organizations in town, such as Bay Path, who are now paying water and sewer. We would be looking at an enterprise fee. So it's another way of looking at all of the funds not coming out of the property tax, because right now there's real burden. And it's something we have to start thinking out of the box and how we're going to fix it. To pick the very small businesses in town and say we're going to really increase that to bring it down to how much are they going to save. He said a small amount. I think we really need to see how else we can do it. It's just a thought. But I would not support the split rate at this time.
Paul?
I want to remind the board and the public that for the last 2 years, we, the select board, have had the opportunity to not raise your taxes to the full maximum. And that would total about $300,000 a year in unused money that the town wouldn't have raised. That. Now, it's a small amount. That's a token amount. Okay, that's a token amount, $300,000 out of a $60 million budget. But what we did as a board, or the majority vote of the board, was that to spend that $300,000. So when we did have an opportunity to save it, we didn't save it. And it would have been a token gesture to say, and it would have been token, it would have been good fiscal planning, quite frankly, because we have a council on aging building that you heard about, you voted for a study on a town meeting, that'll be coming online. We just had an article for $250,000 for the study and potential of a new DPW facility. So at what point are we going to stop talking and actually take some action to help homeowners? And again, we had a 16% increase in water bills for homeowners and businesses across the board, but it was a 16% increase. And this is not a token. This is a significant savings to each individual homeowner in Long Meadow. So we can talk all we want about enterprise funds. We can talk, but we can talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk as a board, because we raised the levy limit to the maximum to spend more money. So at some point in time, we have to say to the homeowners, you heard the assessor say that the aggregate valuations went up 0.3%. That means in the last year, the values of homes didn't even go up 1% in town. And I think if you're a homeowner and you're looking to sell your house, depending on the category and the size of it and so forth, you're seeing it. And my proposal is to offer property tax relief to the homeowner. That's specifically what it is. It's not a token, it's not a gesture, it's property tax relief for homeowners. I'm not concerned about what other towns do with enterprise funds. We can take those up. If there's another way to save money, I'm all for it. But we had an opportunity to save money and not spend it, and we spent it. So the actions of this board speak louder than the workings of the board, and I just think it's time to offer the relief to the residents that they deserve. You got a question on that?
Alex, he can go first. Mark can go first.
Go ahead, Mark.
This is, I think, my 5th tax classification hearing, and I'm on record past 4 of proposing or voting for a split tax rate on all 4 of the other times. But I will say that in my wildest dreams of what might happen here tonight, I didn't anticipate support for a 50% shift. I think that's a little bit heavy and one shot. I was thinking probably half of that or a little bit less, and I'm certainly in favor of a split tax rate. I think that there are benefits to the residents to do that. I think the commercial properties in this town are highly desirable because residents do shop in there. I think that there's been a recent history of a valuation differential between residential and commercial that would support a split tax rate, but I'm not quite sure how I'd go with a 50% split in tax rate. I think that's a little heavy, and I'd much prefer to have something less than that the first year that we do it.
Alex?
I'm in favor of a split tax rate as well, and I guess the reasons are twofold. One is the businesses, the chart that we have before us and the rates that we're looking at are based on the average residential property and then the average commercial or industrial property. So the average residential property right now is valued at $326,000. The average commercial or industrial property is $1,700,000. We heard from somebody from the Twin Hills Club who have an assessed value of $4 million. The thing that I see is that businesses with values that high are more able to absorb increases. They can shift those costs to customers in a way that most residents can't. Especially senior citizens. You're on a fixed income. There's no give there. As Mark was pointing out, the commercial properties are highly desirable in this town. I think largely because they're so limited. We've conferred a benefit in effect on commercial property by restricting the amount of it. And so therefore, everybody who has commercial or industrial property, it's more valuable. The other issue that and again, it's been referenced both by Mr. Santinello and Mr. Gold, is the differential in valuation. And I was here last year, and Mr. Leclerc explained it in general terms about how the end goal is the same, is to find a true market value, but the methodology is different. At least that's how I understood it. I think the result, though, is that the methodology tends to favor commercial and industrial properties, in terms of the valuation. So in a sense, the shift, a shift would tend to correct some of that imbalance. I'm going to be, in favor of a split rate. I guess, I think, Mark, you bring up a good point about, a 50% shift being a lot in 1 year. You know, and perhaps if that's where this board can achieve consensus, maybe that's the best thing to do at this time. And then we can look at it again, you know, a year from now.
Are you offering an amendment to the motion?
No, I'm just making the
Okay.
comment.
Okay.
I'll
All right.
offer, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just want to, everyone says it's very valuable property and it's wanted space, but we've had a lot of empty spaces in Long Meadow, and they've just started to come in. And when you talk about who's going to be paying for this, it's often the small business owner. It's the person who's got the little hair salon. It's the person who has the dry cleaners. We're not looking at CVS and the big corporations having to pay. A lot of this are Long Meadow residents who have small businesses, and their rents are going to go up substantially. And can they pass that down? Or is it going to be cheaper for someone to go down to Enfield or to East Longmeadow and take their dry cleaning there, or to get their hair done there? So we're talking about really impacting people's lives. Now, if we were really worried about the senior citizens, we would sit down and we would look at the full issue about trying to give tax breaks to the senior citizen. That was pushed aside several years ago. We should go back and we should look at the full, if we're interested in helping the seniors, let's look at a senior citizen discount or break. If we're really interested in how we're going to have a more even payment of all towns, including of nonprofits, and paying towards these projects, let's look at another enterprise fund. But to say, oh, well, we're going to be fair to we're going to shift the burden so largely to the small percentage, I don't, when we talk about fair and just, I don't think that's fair and just. So I will totally vote against this. Whether you make it 50% or 20%, we're talking about a very small number of commercial properties in town.
Okay,
That's it.
you're going to make an amendment to the
Yeah,
motion?
I'd like to make amend the motion to set a split tax rate with a 10% shift, which would be a residential rate of $23.62 and a commercial rate of $26.14, a differential of $2.52.
Mr. McClare, could you come up and tell us what that impact is? Are you able to assemble those figures for us?
They're in the...
I would like him to go on camera, though.
Mark, could you repeat your numbers, please?
Are you looking at the water spreadsheet, Mark?
No, I'm looking at the summary in advance. It says a 10% shift would have residential tax rates of $23.62
Okay.
and a commercial rate of $26.14.
Okay, the 10% shift would reduce the tax rate from $23.76 to
It's on page 10.
$23.62.
Right.
14 cents.
Right.
And that would lower the yearly property tax burden to the average residential homeowner or residential property owner by $45. And it would increase the average commercial property by $4,500.
Actually, it's 4,254.
So I'm sorry, 4254.
Okay, so the average residential property, which is valued at $326,500, would actually go down a total tax of $45.71.
Correct.
And a commercial business at that 1.787.553 million would go up $4,254.38 for the year.
Correct. And obviously, when Mr. Carteropoli was here, his property value is close to double that average, so he'd see a significant impact.
So the impact would be, what,
Probably $8,000 to $10,000 increase in his tax bill.
Okay. Yes, Mary?
So the average saving for a Long Meadow resident would be $45.71.
$45.71, that's correct.
Okay.
That's an average resident at a value of $326,500.
So people whose houses are less expensive would actually be seeing less than $45.
That's true. And the ones that are more expensive than that would see more. And then you've got, I guess you also have the factors, we have the site index factors that play into that also?
The site index has already impacted the assessed value of the
Okay.
property. There's no additional
No
impact.
additional, but that
No.
still is a factor that's in there. Correct.
Well, the idea is that every property is valued at what it would reasonably sell for, willing buyer, willing seller, as of January 1st, under no extraordinary circumstances, conditions requisite to a fair sale, and so forth and so on.
Right. Okay.
Is the amendment seconded?
No, excuse me, was the amendment seconded? I'm looking for a second on the amendment. Seeing no second? Amendment fails. Stephen?
Part of my duties as town manager's planning and community development.
Amendment, yeah.
And even though this is a select board decision, I would say from a community development standpoint, there are places where a split tax rate makes sense for the community and the impact is meaningful and somewhat shared. I think the analysis laid out by the assessor shows that it is disproportionately impactful on commercial businesses. And I agree in principle. I mean, it's obvious, from an economic standpoint, certainly they will pass through the costs to the customers. My concern from a community development standpoint is there are many other options out there for businesses, whether it's a retail business or financial planning or lawyers or something like that. And so if somebody in a triple net lease sees their rates go up, there are just so many other options around here for that I think if you create a situation where, because taxes are high and other locations are more preferable because of the taxes, you'll see more vacancies in commercial property. And I don't want to speak for the assessor, but if a commercial property has prolonged vacancies, it does affect their assessed values. And the assessed values would then go down, and you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I agree that, I don't, just based on my economic and planning community development experience, I don't think a split tax rate makes sense for Long Meadow, simply because we don't have a lot of commercial, and we do have really a high number of, we may have franchises, but the franchisees are local people, and they may not have a Long Meadow zip code, but they may live in the region and support community initiatives. I think that, when we had the discussion about the shops, there was a lot of talk of corporate interests versus small local businesses. A shift like that really makes it so the only people that can afford to do business are the corporations, not the mom and pops. And like I said, from a community development standpoint, I would caution against a shift of that size. I think it could have unintended negative consequences down the line.
Okay. Alex?
Just to sort of respond to Stephen's point, I think one of the logical errors that we sometimes make is that businesses charge more based on what their costs are. If we take the Long Meadow shops or any large landowner, they're going to charge what the market can bear. If the market can bear a higher rate and we keep their taxes low, they're going to raise rents. One does not follow the other. So I think one of the things that I learned in representing corporations is there's no cap on profits. If a company is making 20%, they're thinking, why aren't I making 25, or why aren't I making 30? And so there's no sort of optimum. It's always can I make more, which is what free market capitalism is all about. So the impact on local small businesses, you could be driven out simply because market rates are going up. I don't think ultimately it's going to be because we have a split rate.
Mr. Gold?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat my motion to request an amendment for a 10% shift.
Okay, I would like to second this to get on discussion. I know normally the chair doesn't second, but I'll second for discussion purposes. Maureen?
Corporations are mom and pop businesses too. Corporations are the living local people who have bonded together to try to make the small local businesses grow. And I can tell you, if they were here, they would speak very strongly against this. And when tax rates go up, it does increase rents. It's not just has to do with the market, it has to do with costs, and that is an element of it. And to say that corporations are only interested in the bottom line, that's not true. There are also businesses and corporations in town that really care about Longmeadow and would like to stay in Longmeadow and like to be part of the community. But if we take this and we push this rent up so high, there reaches a point where the sense of community and wanting to be in Longmeadow and being able to survive will not coexist. And that is a huge jump for a lot of small businesses in town. So everyone concentrates on the CBS or the Max's Burger or something like that. But I look at all the other small businesses that are in town that are renting space in office buildings that are above the banks, that are down the street. We have a lot of pockets of small businesses, and a lot of them are incorporated, but they're still mom and pops, and they're still locals, and they're still residents. And I think that doing this will be devastating to a lot of businesses, and I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of them would have to close their doors. It's not an easy season. If you look at what happened on Friday, there weren't a lot of people out shopping. This is not an easy economy. People are not seeing their personal income growth grow. We've seen that. So people have jobs, they have multiple jobs. If that business shuts down, the 4 or 5 people that were behind the counter aren't going to have jobs anymore. And so I think that instead of saying there's a lot of money there, the corporations have a lot of money, no, these are small businesses that are hiring Longmeadow people, that are trying to provide service to Longmeadow. People like to be able to go into their local liquor store that's owned locally. They like to be able to go down and buy a present for their child at a local store. And some of these will have to close their doors if you start to push this hard, because it's not an easy economy. So I strongly vote, whether it's the 10% or the 50%, it's going to hurt a lot of people.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Any other discussion? Paul?
One other point. You know, the 3 most important words in real estate: location, location, location. I understand what you're saying, Stephen. There's a reason why businesses, whatever they are, locate to Longmeadow and possibly not to Wilbraham, because you can't get there from here from the highway without going an extra 20, 25 minutes. There's not a business in the world that I have an argument against. You want to go make money, go make money. If you're going to pass the cost on to your renters, then you're going to pass it on anyway. Rent isn't being held down because we have a single tax rate. Let's not be foolish enough to say that either. The cost of a drink or the cost of a prescription at CVS is the same if you went here, you went into Ludlow, I would imagine, or Chicopee or wherever. I mean, you know, by having a single tax rate, we're not saving the residents of Longmeadow any more or any less, because the corporation, and again, whether it's mom or pop or not, if they're going to close down, they're not, and this is the thing that made them close down, then it's the thing that made them close down. I'm not trying to dismiss any of that. I'm a small business owner. The reality is, if this were to pass, my rent would probably go up. And the reality, though, is that more than 95% of our constituents are homeowners. And Marie, you just made a really valid point. Income levels aren't growing, home values aren't growing. And we're talking about home values, and the relief I want to give are to those 95+% residents of Longmeadow that are in a home. We can agree to disagree on this one, and that's fine. But I don't see the same correlation of the cost of a prescription drug at a drugstore, whether the tax rate's single or not. I don't see the correlation between the cost of a drink at a restaurant if the tax rate were the same or not. Nor do we argue with corporations or any business when they make money. We're not saying you have to give us more if you make more. This is about giving relief to the constituents that we represent, 95% plus, that live in this town.
Okay,
I just want to speak to the amendment if I could.
Okay.
I'm trying to put together a compromise here, obviously, and I guess there are 2 sides. It appears to be at least 2 sides to this issue. And if either side, and I'm talking to my fellow select board members here, are concerned that a 50% shift is too much, or a 0 shift and flat tax rate is not something they want to do, ask that they consider voting for a 10% shift in the tax rate as a means of moving in the right direction, but not moving so far that it's, in my opinion, overly burdensome to the commercial operations. But I do feel strongly that there needs to be a shift, and I suspect that if this if the amendment fails, I may anyway vote for a 50% shift, but I may not.
Okay. Well, everybody's had ample opportunity to speak except me. And I guess the first thing, I'm not naive enough to think that the costs don't get passed on to consumers. We see that every day. It's going to happen. I think a proposal of a 50% tax increase on our businesses is way, way, way over bounds for me. I couldn't even conceive that with the limited amount of information that I personally have on what the real impact would be on our businesses. I know we have some charts and graphs up here, but I don't have any real compound information from a retail perspective on what the impact would be, especially on a small business. I'm not talking about the CVSs and all that seem to have a way to spread this across the country and they still have a great bottom line. I'm talking about the really small businesses that are owned and operated in our community. We live in a strange town because we don't have a large commercial zone. I think we realize that. I think a lot of us moved to the town because of that. The ironic part about it is that Longmeadow is distinctly Longmeadow, and it will be this way. It's been this way since the early 30s. It was even before then. It has never been a business community. It's always been a premier residential community. I think it will forever stay as a premier residential community. And without any information, without more information on the total impacts of this decision that this 5-member board would make, I cannot go forward with a tax increase at this time. I have to stay the status quo. And I realize it could be open to correction next year, but at this point, I just don't have enough information to feel justified moving forward. I supported Mr. Gold's amendment because I wanted to get it on the table. I think he has a valid point, and his point needs to be heard, and he had every right in the world to present his view and have the board comment on it. Any more debate or comments on the issue?
Rich, I just have a question for you,
Sure.
because you mentioned something about not having enough information.
Right.
Then how is there enough information of a single tax rate?
The status quo has not had any significant impacts that I'm aware of. And when I look at the fact that a 1% or the 10% shift in me on an average homeowner is going to be $45 as opposed to an average of $4,254 on a commercial business, I'd like to know what that impact's going to be. First of all, I think the impact's going to be felt in my pocket. If I shop in Longmeadow, I'm going to pay that. And I think everybody understands it. I'm going to pay that. Nobody's going to accept that much of a hit. If the figures were right that we talked about at the golf course, the people who use that golf course are going to pay those extra fees. So we're putting the tax on somebody else. It's a smoke and mirror game, if you want, to the old government trick. But that's my feelings, Paul. It's such a significant difference on a business, on a small business, as opposed to what it is on a residential, because we are, 95% residential. And I know you're small businessman too, and you would have that. Well, you'd have an indirect impact, wouldn't you?
I'm sure it would be direct.
Yeah. So, okay. Any other discussion?
Lunches are meeting, so.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll first vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment? All opposed?
No.
Okay. Amendment. The amendment passes. Now,
No,
I
it
think
amends the main
that
motion.
amends the main, and I think if we're right, that nullifies the main.
No, now you're voting on the motion as amended.
So who opposed the amendment?
Ms. Angelides and Mr. Foster.
Mr. Foster. But that changes the original motion. It no longer is
Right,
at 50%.
Right, the motion to the motion is now
10% shift.
Okay, 10%. There seems to be a little confusion because I saw some proceedings where that wasn't taking place, but we will allow that to go place. Yes, Mary, more discussion before we make the vote?
Actually, I put another motion on the floor to continue this meeting to another night when we can have residents come forward and voice their the effects that it will have, since you expressed you were concerned about that.
Okay, well, since I did second a motion for Mr. Gold, I'll second a motion for discussion, but that's an amendment to the motion?
No, that's a new motion.
Whole separate motion? Okay, I need help on the procedural on this one.
I mean, I guess I would say that motion's probably out of order at this time.
I think it would have to.
Or you can make a motion to table, but I think
Table.
I have to check with the finance director. I think we have to set the tax rate tonight.
We have to get the tax bills out by the end of the month. We need about 2 or 3 weeks. So
Yeah, we're already up against it.
So we can, it looks like you'd have an easy way to go next year, Marie, but now it may be difficult.
Well, we could ask that we have a special meeting in 1 week.
We could. When's the tax rate have to be set, Paul?
Again, the tax rate has to be set. It has to give us ample time to get it approved by the Department of Revenue. You have to get it to a printer and out. Next week would be cutting it kind of tight. It's doable, but that would be probably the last time you could have a vote on it, actually.
Okay.
And Mr. Foster, the question
Yes,
I
sir.
would have is, last 2 weeks ago, we had the assessors here.
Right.
And this is actually a posted tax classification hearing.
Correct. Your point's well taken, Mr. Stanton.
Correct.
This was an actual tax classification hearing, which has been publicized for at least a 2 to 4 week period.
I think we're doing something we haven't done, like Mr. Santinello said, in 8 to 10 years. And we're talking about decreasing residents' tax rate by $45.71 and increasing the average commercial bill by $4,254. I feel that this is such a big change that we should allow the residents to have a chance to speak to this.
Go ahead, Ms. Gold.
Yeah, two things. One is this is a tax classification hearing, and people did have the opportunity to come. Some people have availed themselves of that. Secondly, as somebody who's in favor of the amended motion, I'll stipulate to the fact that we will get a parade of people in here telling us what a dire effect this will have on their small businesses or their personal office space rental. I understand it's an effect. It will have an effect, but let's face it is a 10% shift, and to use the number $4,254 increase versus a $45 decrease is a disservice, because as a percentage, it's the same percentage. Okay, it's a 10% shift for people. The average commercial tax rate is significantly higher than the average residential tax rate. The average commercial tax rate is $4,627. Currently, it's $42,472. The average residential is $7,700. So on a $42,000 bill, it's not you're not really comparing the same thing. So I just don't feel that pushing this off to another week is going to do anything to change the outcome, potentially. It certainly will make people feel good if they want to march in here and tell us all kinds of things about what this effect will have. But tonight was the night to do it. It was posted, it was advertised, and people ought to know that this would be the night to do it. So I'm opposed to extending this on.
Okay. Looking at the graph, I may be wrong, but I see the commercial rate going from 42,000 to 46,000.
Right.
And that's close to 10% more money.
It's called a 10% shift. I get that.
And I don't, for some reason, I don't see the same correlation taking place on the other one.
No, because there's more residential properties, but it's not
more residential properties.
But it's not a different. My point was, it sounds like it's 100% difference. The difference between $45 and $4,200.
Right.
But it's not. 100 times the tax increase. It's it is in dollars, average dollars, but it's not in percentages.
But if it went up the same 10% on the average residential rate, it would be $77.
Right.
And instead it's only
45.
45. So there is a differential there because of the cost of the property
percentages,
involved.
but not
Okay, I just thought I'd mention that part too. So
you're right.
There is, if you get the charts and look at it, the information reveals itself differently. Okay.
Did we have a motion to table?
We have a procedural problem. I'm not quite sure. We've got an open motion over here that the amendment's been approved.
Right. So we do have I mean, you could entertain a motion to table the matter. I think at any time.
It requires a two-thirds vote, though.
It
It requires two-thirds vote.
Right.
And I don't think the votes are here to table the motion, so I may be speaking for the crew. I mean, I shouldn't be doing that, but the general flair of the board, I don't think there's a two-thirds, but that's going to take a 4-to-1 vote. And I don't think it's here.
You can entertain them. You could go through the motions. on the
Motion
Go through
to
the motion.
table.
Motion to table, okay, I'll second it. Any discussion on table the motion? It's going to take a two-thirds vote to table the motion. All in favor of tabling the motion? All in opposed? Okay, motion fails.
So who opposed?
Mark. Go.
Yeah.
Send it out.
3-2, so it failed, the motion failed. Okay,
So now the motion to set the tax rate, the motion to establish the tax rate at $23.62 for residential and $26.14 for commercial is what you are now voting on.
Right, that's the primary motion before.
That is the primary
But now
motion. That
that
is the
has
motion before the board.
been, the amendment has already, you brought in the amended prices on that?
That is the 10%
Okay, so that is it. So, do you want to read it one more time for the cameras?
Okay, so then the motion by, originally by Mr. Santinello, seconded by Mr. Grant, as amended by Mr. Gold's amendment, would establish the tax rate for the town of Long Meadow in the bills that will be going out at the end of the month, where it is currently just $23.76 for both residential and commercial. Under this motion, the residential tax rate would be $23.62 per thousand, and $1,000 of assessed value, and then the commercial tax rate would be $26.14 per assessed value, per $1,000 of assessed value.
Okay. Any other discussion on the original motion or the amended motion? Okay, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passed. 3-2. Thank you for the people who came in and talked about Bob for coming and talking tonight to the board. Okay, board committee interviews. We have 3 interviews tonight. I guess we have one for the audit committee. Would you like to come forward, sir? You can take a seat up here and you can state your name and your address for the record, please.
Mr. Chair, could I just have a procedural question?
Sure.
Were these advertised? Because I didn't see,
Yeah.
I didn't hear a response, but no, it's okay. I
As
just
far
missed a note.
as I know, they were
I missed a note,
advertised.
so-
Yeah. Stephen, that is correct. These were properly advertised on the website, et cetera.
I believe so. I did
Yeah,
not,
I
I did not
think- I
independently
think you're
verify
Okay,
that.
no, I missed it. I just wanted to ask clarify.
Yeah, because when I talked to Debbie.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. Could you go ahead and state your name and your address for the record?
Hi, my name is Akem Kabir, and my address is 49 Yarmouth Street, Long Meadow.
Thank you, sir. And you're applying for the,
Audit Committee.
which position are you applying for on there? You have a one-term, one 3-year term expiring on 6/30/16 and 2 associate non-voting positions. Which position are you applying for?
Can you make
One is a voting member,
Okay.
and the other ones are associate members. It wouldn't be a
We
voting.
need a voting member, so whether he likes it or not,
Yeah.
we might appoint him to the voting
Yeah,
position.
we're not going to give you any choice. You're going to be a voting member.
Okay.
So, could you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, sir?
So I am Akem Kabir. I am a resident of Long Meadow last 2 years. Actually, I moved to US 4.5 years ago. Still, I am a permanent resident member, not a citizen. Hopefully, I will get my citizenship next year. So, I did my master's in accounting from University of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and I started my career in 1993 in Rural Electrification Board as an auditor. So last 20 years, I am doing accounting, finance, and auditing job. So I think I am fit for that position, and I can contribute my knowledge and efficiency to the Long Meadow community.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Do we have any questions by the board? Go ahead, Paul.
Mr. Kabir, thank you for applying. The audit committee rather has met at times like at 4 or 5 in the afternoon. Is that a conflict for you to attend the meetings, or would you be able to attend them?
Yeah, I can attend because I do 10 to 5 or 5:30.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions by the board? Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go.
Well, I just wanted to thank you. I know we've been really struggling to pull together a really good audit committee, and your experience, we really appreciate you coming forward in this public service. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Gold?
Yeah, just a quick question about one of the side functions. It's not all just financial auditing, it's sometimes procedural auditing. Is there anything that you've seen or been heard or told about the town's procedures or financial auditing that you'll be particularly focusing on? Or is this something that you're just going into it with a kind of an open mind and hoping to fill a seat?
I think I can comment on procedural audit committee meeting. I can recommend it to finance committee or the general procedure. I think I can comment on that report.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the depth of your knowledge in your resume is rather significant. We do appreciate you coming forth and, wishing to serve on one of the communities or one of the committees in our community. Do we have any other questions by the board members? Okay. What we will do, we'll announce 2 weeks from now, at our next meeting, we'll announce who has been put in the position. So at that point, there'll be a public announcement within 2 weeks.
Okay, my pleasure.
And thank you for coming in tonight, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Gorman go first so we can interrogate Mr. Bartlett?
Sure, yeah. Mr. Gorman? Mr. Gorman, you are putting in for an associate non-voting member of the Cable Advisory Committee.
Correct.
Dazzle us, sir.
Okay, my name's Paul Gorman at 266 Pinewood Drive in Long Meadow. My background experience for a cable committee, I sat on a cable committee before up in Turner's Fall. I've also was a system architect at Newell Rubbermaid. So as far as technically, I'm very savvy as far as different technologies out there. Very aware of what's cost effective and what's practical. And also very aware of how different kind of cable companies or DSL or other types of services and their methods and ways of going about doing business.
Great, thank you, sir. Any comments? Yes.
Not a comment, but a question. We've been led to believe that our Cable Advisory Committee, since we signed a contract, I think a year and a half ago, has got limited authority in the interim till another contract comes up. What's been your experience since you've been on a Cable Advisory Committee, the impact that our Cable Advisory Committee can have in a period when we're not actively negotiating a contract?
Well, I mean, it depends, what's written in the contract for one, okay, and how much leeway is in there. It also depends on what the subject is, and it's kind of a give and take type situation. So I don't know a direct way to answer it. So it depends on what the issue is.
It's generally got to do with customer issues, I think you'll find. Thank you.
Any others, Dan? I need to apologize. I said dazzle me, and I take that back. That sounds very insulting. I'd like to publicly say that was a very poor use of words on my part, because I have absolutely no knowledge of the Cable Advisory Committee. So let me personally apologize for making that comment to you. I certainly didn't mean it the way it could have been interpreted.
I was dazzled.
Yeah.
But I think you're really
But I appreciate you stepping forward, sir. And if there's no other comments, it'll be another 2 weeks, and we'll give a full notification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now our featured speaker.
Just understand, there's nobody in the operating room. The cameras are off, the microphones are off.
Yeah, we're all got fuzzy faces at this time.
It's focused on the top.
All right, stop.
They're all focused right on Mr. Bartlett. He's getting ready to talk.
Good evening, and I'd like to thank the chairman and the board of allowing me to speak. I am applying for a position.
Name and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
My name is David Bartlett. I live at 71 Edgewood Avenue in Long Meadow, Massachusetts.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I am applying for a position, a non-voting position on the Cable Advisory Committee. My qualifications: for the last 7 years, I've been station manager of LCTV. For the last 32 years, I've been involved in cable and broadcast.
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree from Quinnipiac University, although I graduated in 1977 and things have changed dramatically. And I've been to every cable advisory meeting since my tenure started with LCTV, so that's been 7 years of attending the meetings as an invited guest of the chairman of that committee. So I have plenty of exposure to how the town of Long Meadow does business with Comcast and vice versa. And that is all I have to say, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any comments, questions by the board?
Well, that's because we're neighbors and we know. Is there, and actually I'm surprised that, like you said, you've been there as an invited guest, so I'm just actually surprised that you're not there as a part of the committee, as a non-voting member anyway, as a director of LCTV.
Right.
What's the relationship between Cable Advisory and LCTV, and do you see if is there any conflict with that?
Well, the chairman of the Cable Advisory Committee is the chairman of the LCTV board. And I believe 3 other members are also LCTV board members. Do I see any conflict? No, I don't believe I do. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of conflict of interest of being policies that affect LCTV decided upon the Cable Advisory Committee, and and that hasn't occurred. Now, the Cable Advisory, though, did negotiate with Comcast for our current rates that we do get from Comcast.
Okay.
So
I also want to remind you that the current chair of the Cable Advisory Board told us to forget cable and go to Wi-Fi at the last meeting we had. So.
Well, my time on this earth, as far as LCTV is concerned, is very limited.
Yeah.
So I know the end is not near, but it's on the way.
Thank you, Dave.
Any other questions? Maureen?
Actually, that brings up, I know they talked about that. One of the things is Cable Advisory Committee looking about what we're going to do in 8 years.
No.
And so there's
Nothing
no
has been
looking
discussed.
forward to figure out what we're going to do
Not
for the
yet.
next generation.
Not yet. Although if I'm on the committee, I might push that because I'd like to know what's going to happen to LCTV.
Yeah.
My guess is it will stop existing, but that might be a premature statement. I'd like to see it continue, if it not for anything but this service. I think this is very important to the town of Long Meadow, as you guys do.
Any other?
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bartlett, thank you for stepping forward, and 2 weeks from now, we'll be announcing.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, old business, approval of the minutes. Yes, Paul? Oh, excuse me, correction. Paul just reminded me, it'd be 3 weeks before we have our next meeting. No, it'd be the 15th.
2 weeks.
Yeah, 15th, and then we'll go to January.
There's no meeting on the calendar for the 29th.
No, it should be the 15th.
It's the 2 weeks from now is the 15th, Paul.
Oh, jeez, I thought we
Yeah,
were on the
15th.
15th. Oh, gosh,
Okay.
I forgot about that. Wow, sorry about that, sir. Wow.
You're charging right into Christmas on us, Paul.
I'm done. Shopping's over.
Okay, old business, approval of the minutes. We have minutes from September 2nd, 15th, September 22nd, October 6th, October 15th, October 20th, October 21st, November 3rd, and November 17th. Mr. Gold had reviewed most of these minutes and presented over the weekend some modifications to the minutes. We, in turn, had our clerk send the minutes out to the board members so they could get a brief idea of what they were, to hopefully we'd be able to somewhat condense our correspondence during our discussion tonight. So, do you want to go one at a time?
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes, sir.
I've got to say, because we got all those changes in the middle, I guess, this morning, I was not in a position to review them all.
Okay.
So if we do, I would suggest getting us a chance to review the changes, because I know Mark always takes care in reviewing the minutes. But if you do want to go ahead and have a vote.
Well, are you going to give a motion, Mr. Grant?
Like, I guess what I'm saying is I'll abstain. I would prefer not to decide the minutes until we've had a chance to review the edits.
Okay, so you choose not to do a motion, just abstention.
Can I just ask, Mr. Grant, did you review the minutes, though, as sent out? And I guess the question is, I'm just trying to get a consensus here, not push you into a corner here, because I know you didn't get much advance notice that might change.
Right.
But I mean, would you prefer then we go through the changes here? Because had they not been sent to you, that's what my intent was.
Right,
that we
right.
go through them sentence by sentence here. It's just going to take.
No, I think the procedure is great to send around edits, so we're not taking up all these people's time. And I don't think this is a good use of our time. I don't think it's good use of the public side for us to be wordsmithing minutes.
I just want you to feel comfortable with what's going out as the minutes of the meeting.
Right,
That's all I'm saying. So, especially the point where it has you. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Are we saying all of them, or did you get to the first two, or can we do any of them?
It is the pleasure of the board. I will entertain any motion presented.
Would you be comfortable if we did a couple of them, or?
You're talking to
Alex, yeah.
Oh, Alex, okay.
Like I said, I don't know which. I just haven't had a chance to look at any of these edits,
Any of them, okay.
and there's quite a few of them. So, I mean, I guess I'll make a motion to lay on the table the minutes, and then consider it next meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You'll second or no one second?
I second it.
Okay, she seconded. Any discussion on laying on the table? Oh, wait a minute, it's non-debatable, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a majority vote?
2/3 vote, I thought.
2/3? Is it a 2/3? Okay, all in favor of laying on the table until next meeting? Okay, motion passed. I believe it was 5-0. Okay, review the PVPC report on Quinnetuck Road. Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Richard. We did, just to kind of go back a little bit, we had, some time ago, I had presented a recommendation about a temporary closure for Quinnetuck Road based on concerns that were brought to the town's attention by all of the residents on that street, and a significant amount of analysis that was done by our traffic committee, which is the chief of police, the town engineer, the director of public works, and myself. And we had done several different traffic counts and looked at it a few different ways and kind of gone through it internally and made a recommendation to temporarily close the street to see if it would mitigate what we felt was a higher than really an excessive amount of cut-through traffic, and study the impacts of that temporary closure. The board had additional questions that were not addressed by our recommendation, and we retained the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to address to address the concerns raised by the board, analyze the potential impact on the intersection of Wolf Swamp Road and Frank Smith Road, where the current cut-through traffic on Quinnetuck would go, and then give some additional information about traffic calming options. I won't recite the report. It is in your packet. And it gives a summary. Pioneer Valley had done the original study that had yielded the four-way stop sign at that Wolf Swamp and Frank Smith intersection, so they were familiar with this area, very familiar with the area. They did go through the concerns raised, really point by point. They laid out some of the pros and cons of different traffic calming measures. They also submitted some best practices in the Pioneer Valley, a document that they produced for traffic calming best practices. And for those who aren't initiated, traffic calming refers generally to techniques that municipalities employ to reduce speed, increase safety, either vehicle safety or pedestrian safety. They can range from road closure to speed humps to signage to bump outs. There are many, many different ways to do it. Different. I shouldn't say there are many, many. there are several different ways to do traffic calming. There really are not a limitless amount of tools in the toolbox, but each situation is unique and calls for its own appropriate. If it does call for an appropriate traffic calming technique, then they have the best practices laid out. So, I guess I would turn it over to the board for discussion and/or questions.
Okay, I think it'd be noted the board has not had a lot of time with this report. I think this just come out. Was this presented prior to these?
Yeah,
I couldn't remember when we got it out.
Mid last week.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. Okay. Do we want a motion to approve this report to get our discussion going?
I mean, it's just as information submitted.
Okay.
Richard, I think, we
Yeah, they're
talked about
going to be allowed to come up.
Okay.
Yeah. And we said before he'd be allowed to come up. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, Stephen, I understand you didn't do this report, but it came through to me as, well, there's a lot of things you can do. We don't have any specific recommendations, but you should do a full study and get a town-wide policy. By the way, here's the kind of thing we did for West Springfield. And I got to say that I was somewhat disappointed that they didn't give specific recommendations for Quinnipiac, or even say, here's what you can do, and more importantly, here's what you can't do. On the other hand, there's a lot of information there, and it's, it gives us some good food for thought for where we want to go in the future. But at this point, I'd love to suggest that, we take the actions that might be appropriate, like, authorize the town manager to change the traffic pattern of Quinnipiac one way, to make it a one-way street for 90 days or 120 days or something like that, so that we can see if in fact we can have a significant impact on this short of closing the street, which I think many of us, or at least I was, opposed to in the past. And I got to tell you, when I look at it, whether it's one way going east or one way going west, I would think the residents would prefer one way going west, which is toward Frank Smith, as opposed to, and it makes a lot more sense, so that they don't have to take a left turn onto Wolf Swamp Road every time they want to go back toward the town of Longmeadow, but rather would have that way to come out. And it certainly would cut down half the traffic in one direction to start with. I'm not suggesting that we go beyond that at this point, but I think we ought to take some positive action.
Okay. On the visitor comments, what we're going to do, go ahead and speak now, because I can let you address the main issue, but not to address each select board's comments.
I think it's important to address each selectman's comment.
Well,
or woman's, because it's
not appropriate.
our
This
street.
isn't a public hearing, but it's not a public hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
It's clear to say you haven't had enough time is not a good excuse. We've heard excuses for 10 months now, or been bounced around like ping pong balls. You guys all got my email. I sent you 90% of what's in this report. I sent it to you the day after our meeting a month ago. He cites, Paul cites the Northampton report and the West Springfield report, which I believe I sent you the day after, if you remember those emails. The exact same information that I sent you, that you opened or not, was in there. So you've had time to kind of digest this as a whole philosophy. And you've had the town, police, fire, Yem, Stephen as well to kind of tell you what's going on and to digest it. So to say you haven't had time to digest it, I think is a bad excuse to kind of keep kicking the can down the road and not do anything. What we would like to see done is an action. And if you look in the traffic calming reports that they sent, West Springfield, Northampton, it doesn't matter. We've taken all the steps. 90% petition participation rate. We have 100%. Come to your planning board or select board or town meeting, council. We've done that. Talk to your town manager. We've done that. Do all the traffic reports. We've done that. We've even went above and beyond and had the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission do a report. Now it's up to you guys to do something about it. That's the point that we're at. So, and if you look in the report, there's really two options. It's temporary speed humps, to try that, or a road closure. It's kind of the two that they recommend. If you read between the lines, those are their recommendations. I talked to Paul, at PVPC, he told me he's not going to make a recommendation. It's not his job to do that. It's his job to answer your questions, and that's exactly what he's done. So, we ask you to, if you want to do it one way, just read the one paragraph. It tells you that, it's probably not the best idea. If you want to do speed bumps, it's going to cost the town a lot of money to do that. And if you look at all the numbers from the other reports, and you can Google it online, it's between 30 and 50%. If you personally feel that a 50% reduction is a good reduction, it's 900 cars a day on a street with 30 houses, and maybe we look at that. But we do need to come up, if you're going to do speed bumps or another motive like a one-way, you can't do stop signs, it's in there. You can't reduce the speed, it's in there. Then we need to set a number. All right, what is that number? Is it 400 cars like in the bylaws on the planning board? Is it 800 cars? Is it 600 cars? What is the number? So no matter what we're going to do, we need to then put a next step behind that to say, okay, we're going to do temporary speed bumps. We're going to do a one-way. Great, we're going to do that, but what is behind that? We're going to run the hoses again. If the number is not reduced by 70%, we're at 400, 600 plus times volume of any of these reports. So the number has to come down significantly. We're not talking 100 cars or 200 cars. So to get it to a safer road, we also have a safety issue with the design flaw, which was not addressed in this report. And Alex and I spoke beforehand on it. Steve knows about it. Richard's been out there, Mark. I don't know if you've been to the street to look at it, but there's an elevation change and a curve in the road. So we need to come up with what's the next step, and then what is the guideline. If it's not close the road, what's the next step, and then what is the guideline to say, okay, it's effective or it's not effective. That's what we're looking for. So is it effective at 100 cars, 200 cars, 300 cars, 400 cars? What is the ultimate number? And you guys should have all that information. It's been 10 months we've been doing this now, so it's not like it's a brand new issue. We just walked into the room.
It's brand new for you, but it may not be new for you.
It's 3 months old, Mark, for you.
I hear you, and what have we been doing for 3 months? We were asked to get a study.
I don't know what you've been doing.
Pioneer Valley Planning Committee. No,
I understand.
If you're going to open it up to a discussion, you open it up to a discussion. I disagree that there should. Well, I disagree that there should be a debate, but you opened it up, so let's debate.
Okay.
The point is, I heard about this the last town meeting that you came to, the town open discussion, whatever it was called.
Correct.
We put it to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. They've just now issued a report. So to say we've been doing nothing for 90 days isn't a fair statement. I've been doing nothing now since last Thursday, and it takes us 48 hours to hold a meeting. So please don't come in here and tell me I've been doing nothing, because I've been doing something from the moment I heard about it, of getting the facts straight and not saying that the residents of the town have the right to close a road because they don't like it. Because I've lived on the road for a year and the traffic is higher than I thought it was going to be, and I want the traffic shut down. That's not the way the town runs.
You're directing that at me. You should direct that at the 30 other people as well. We've been there for 20 years, 50 years, 30 years respectively.
I'm telling you that you came in here and said, I've been doing nothing for 90 days and I need to do something, and I don't like that statement because I believe it's not true. You may have been talking to the town manager, but as I indicated to you in an email back to you, because I've been responding to your emails.
You have, and we spoke on the phone.
That's right.
You've had the reports, Mark. I sent you the exact same report here.
We can only act in a public hearing. We can only act at a public select board meeting. To say that we've had the reports, I can't, in between meetings, call up anybody else on the select board and take action, or even conspire to take action, even discuss taking action. That's against the law, okay? I must act at this meeting and these meetings only. So I just want to make sure you understand that.
I get that.
But I'm really not happy with having you come in here and say we've been doing nothing, because in fact we have been moving toward a resolution. If you heard before you spoke, I said to the town manager, I don't think the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was much, and I think we need to take action tonight. So my first statement was we need to take action. So for you to come in here and say, Select Board, you better take action, that I totally disagree with your approach here. I really do. I mean, tell me what you want, other than you want what you want, and I understand it. But the wheels of government sometimes turn a little bit more slowly than people in town would like. I get that. That's just the way it goes.
We just want to make sure that you're aware of the situation.
We're more than aware of it.
Okay. And I did clearly state that we were not going to be involved in a debate. I allowed the individual to address the board. I understand your point, Mr. Gold. I had the same notes, but are you through with your comments, sir?
Any of you guys? Steve does. You want your paper?
My name is Steve Silver. I'm not going to
Go ahead, sir.
I live in 168 Quinnipiac. And silver always agrees with gold. So I guess I want this approached in a sort of cognitive way, in a way that's logical, that's going to lead to good conclusions, or the right conclusions, not good conclusions. And my concern is it has not been approached in a cognitive way, and there's flaws along the line that I like to address and see if maybe I'm wrong. But my concern is when the matter was addressed to Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, the idea of safety and design was left out, and that was not addressed in the report. And for me, that is the major reason why the road should be closed, besides traffic. My feeling is that a safety issue has been brought to the Select Board and has not been addressed. It was not addressed in the letter to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission as a question that needed to be addressed. And my feeling is now that it's been brought up, it's problematic to all of us. One, it's an issue that hasn't been solved. And number two, because it hasn't been solved, it becomes a liability to the town and the Select Board. The best example I can give is if you give penicillin to a patient that's allergic and you know it's allergic, you have a liability. If you don't know, you don't have any liability. And now the issue has been brought to the fore and needs to be addressed. My other concern is what makes a change and improvement? In other words, what is the criteria that needs to be addressed to say that we have done our job, or that you have done your job, or we have all done our jobs? In other words, is it a 50% reduction in traffic? What are we aiming for? If you say it's 10% and we say it's 50%, we haven't achieved anything, and we're going to be back here arguing again. So I think before we go anywhere, we've got to address the inadequacy of how the report was presented to the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and also ascertain where we need to be. In other words, do we need to get 50% reduction in traffic, or do we need to get a 10% reduction in traffic? If you want the answer, you need to start at the end, not the beginning. So I ask, let's start over again, and before any acrimonious debate, maybe it should be determined, and there's accusations, what is a reasonable period of time to be specified that one takes to review a report? I don't know what it is, but rather than have an acrimonious debate, maybe that should be determined before all the name calling and everything else starts. I think there needs to be standards, and the standards haven't been set as yet. And that's my concern.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Richard,
You're welcome.
I know we're not debating. Just to speak to a couple, I won't speak to the comments directly, but in terms of the approach of the report, a safety issue, and we talked about this before, the safety issue is determined by crash data. In the world of traffic engineering, that's how you determine a safety issue. A perception of feeling unsafe by the volume of cars or the perceived speed of the cars is just that. It's an issue of perception. But the crash data, there was almost, there's no crash. There's no crash data, which means there haven't been crashes on the street, really hardly at all, where the point of in our analysis it dropped out as a consideration because there is not a safety problem because the crash data doesn't justify that. Again, the feeling of unsafeness is not the same thing as saying there is a bona fide safety problem on the street. That's why the report doesn't address it, and I promise you if you talk to Gary Brew at the PVPC, he would also say that safety is not an issue here, and that is and I've had this conversation with other residents, including you. That's something where in the world of traffic engineering, when you want to be cognitive, the cognitive science that it gets applied is traffic engineering, and in that world, safety is related directly to crashes. So that's why that wasn't approached, because there's no data to justify that. In terms of the design of the street, that is really covered by the subdivision regulation component of the report. The one thing you did say that has been mentioned that I do agree with is that one of the big concerns that I've had since the first time I talked to residents of Quintuck Road is the issue of precedence. And doing something here, are you establishing a public policy precedent for the rest of the town that will be difficult to apply consistently? And that's been a concern of mine all the way along, and I think I've expressed that. I think one of the recommendations that Pioneer Valley came out with was develop a policy, or probably better, a bylaw that would basically set those standards and develop criteria and try and qualify, if not quantify, how to approach these issues of cut-through traffic in Long Meadow, which I don't think is going to be a shrinking problem. And I agree with that. I mean, I think in terms of addressing Quintuck Road, the board knows how I feel about the right way to approach that. And I believe the right approach is a full measure. If you're going to do it temporarily to study, I view the others, and I think the report shows that the others are half measures. Nevertheless, I do think that my take from this is perhaps we should establish the policy or a bylaw to set the bar, so the precedent question is essentially taken off the table, in that we can apply it then consistently to other streets that may feel that they are being unreasonably burdened by cut-through traffic. And so I guess if I was going to make an additional recommendation or change it, it would be develop a policy or a bylaw recommendation, perhaps in concert with the planning board, to establish criteria for how to address streets like this, taking into consideration all that we have learned about traffic calming and cut-through streets and this process that we've gone through with the good folks on Quintuck Road, who have been very patient with me. And I do want to support the board in that their role in this has been the shortest part. It's been largely on the town side, on my end. We've taken our time with it because we wanted to be thoughtful and careful. So that's, I hope that satisfies some of the questions.
Okay.
Can I make one last point? Not as a debate.
One last point.
I think the situation on Quintuck is unique. And what's valid for Quintuck may not be valid or generalizable to the general population of Longmeadow. And that's really the point we're making. This is not a street where you can extract a policy and make it generalizable to the whole town. This is a unique situation by virtue of the design as well as the traffic flow. And I made a promise, that's all I'll say.
Okay.
But that's it.
Okay, thank you, sir. Go ahead, Marie.
My understanding, and I might have gotten the facts wrong, was that at some point in time, Quintuck was not a two-way street. It was closed, and that was the original design. So I think that when we try to say we need to look at I agree we need to do a general bylaw, but I feel that it is different in that it really was closed originally and we opened it. And so we should look to, this is a special circumstance because I am concerned about the levels and the fact that it was closed once. One of the things I did have a question on at the end of that report was that they said you always have to be careful when you close a street that your emergency vehicles and your plows can adequately turn around. And I'm not sure if we look at a design for closure, if that's going to be possible. So I'm still tending towards closure if it can be done safely. But again, I'd have to turn to the town and the engineers to see, can we even do that?
When we had that discussion, before we presented our recommendation to the board, the fire chief and the police chief and the engineer did not cite, and the director of public works did not cite that as an issue, if for no other reason. As the report notes, the applicability of someone building a street brand new and what the standards they would have to meet versus somebody modifying an existing street are different and subject to, are eligible for waiver by the planning board. They didn't cite that as a concern, if for no other reason that there are lots of streets that are dead ends that they can't turn around in. And so to say we need to create a 150-foot turnaround for a fire truck here when we have many streets that don't offer that just seems, it would be creating an issue that wasn't necessary. So and plus there are, at the end of the street, at the end that was recommended to be closed, there's another small side street that's a dead end that you could do a 3-point turn, and I mean, they didn't view it as an operational nightmare.
Okay, but we would not be able to get it through planning right now. If we proposed to put in a street, it would not go through the planning commission at this point.
Right, and the planning commission, I think, has met with the residents because there's the official town map, and just like the zoning change thing we've just gone through, it's when you're making a modification to the zoning map or the official town map, which is the map of the streets and the rights of way. It does go through the planning board, then ultimately town meeting, and I do believe that people enjoy, like you said, people enjoy the right to go forward for planning board and kind of mention it that way. So the residents certainly enjoy that opportunity. I think because I also have concerns on the impact of closing a street, and because it is a big deal to close a street. And the issue of precedent, that's why we recommend a temporary closure to kind of look at it before they went ahead with the planning board process and we got handed something possibly that we weren't in agreement with or didn't have a chance to assess the impacts of. So,
when I read the report, everybody said there wasn't any recommendations on the report, but I very distinctly got a recommendation on page 7 when they talk about traffic calming. This is prior to implementation of any transportation improvements or traffic calming measures, PVC would recommend the town of Long Meadow develop a formal traffic calming policy. They did make a very strong recommendation. They said to set this down, don't treat it as unique in the nature of one, but they said set a policy. Because they did feel, they also felt that this could have further ramifications. So there was recommendations made by them. They gave the 30% factor of the reduction for speed humps, but that's just right off the internet. We all know that's what you anticipate is 30% reduction. We don't know whether 30% reduction is going to be enough or not, but that seems to be the missing factor. But they did make a recommendation in here. Yes, Marie?
Yeah, but I found it almost to be, like you said, it was almost like they pulled it out of the file and they said, well, this is what all communities should do. And it really wasn't directed towards this specific street. And I agree we've got to do that, but I think we also have to make a decision on how we're going to provide relief and safety currently. And so I think there are two different issues. I don't think we could wait until the planning board and the whole town. I mean, we're talking probably a year or more before we get a policy going, and I think we should look at making a decision on what we're going to do. And in some ways, I'm almost going back to Stephen's original plan, which is to temporarily close it to see what really happens. I remember you telling me when you first came in town, traffic is like water. You block it one way, and then it flows elsewhere. And I consider it people like rats in mazes. Once they start going one way, they'll keep going. So if we close it and then decide we have to open it, the traffic will still, by tradition, be moving in the other direction. So I think we should still consider a temporary closure as a possibility.
You do have a report, though, that has made recommendations. You can't walk away from that.
No,
this report clearly states their recommendations. If we choose not to follow the recommendations, it's one thing, but to say there was none is a total false.
Yeah. Well, I do want to, it doesn't sound like the most strenuous recommendation or this term, and in terms of recommending a specific traffic calming thing, they did not do that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I will say that when we discussed it with Pioneer Valley in person before they drafted the report, even in that meeting they said, you really ought to do this right, you really ought to do a policy first and not, even though each street is unique and each situation is unique, the process to address these issues should be somewhat formalized, so you have a consistent, repeatable process to evaluate each unique situation.
Right. Well, and I think they addressed everyone. They went one-way streets, and they told the scenario. They gave us the rules and regulations. Then the speed humps, 33% reduction. So, I mean, they gave specific information. We might wanted them to walk in and give us a master plan, and unfortunately, they gave us a lot of stuff that we have to study ourselves and make an appropriate recommendation. Has your engineering department weighed in on this yet?
I mean, this is all that we said. All these same things to each other when we made the initial recommendation. So this was not new information to us.
Okay, but I mean, the staff that we have in this community that analyzes these reports, have they come forward with a recommendation to this board?
That was the first recommendation. The
But
original
I mean, based on this
report,
report
no,
right here.
no, we haven't really followed up on it. But like I said, this was basically a written narrative of the same process we went through internally.
Okay.
So no, we have not gone and revised our recommendation based on this information.
Okay.
And I think, you know, regardless of whatever thing if we choose to take no action at all and just say let the town meeting decide if the street should be closed or not, or if we decide to choose one of these traffic calming measures, I think the issue of precedent is if you say speed humps, people on the other cut-through streets are going to want speed humps. If you say one-way street, people on the cut-through streets are going to. We already have that issue around the high school. So whatever you choose, people are going to want that because many people feel like they are unreasonably burdened with traffic. Not all of those feelings are justified by the data, and that's where the consistent approach to addressing these issues is something that I honestly wish I'd thought of that. I wish my first recommendation was, this is an issue. It's obviously an issue throughout the town. I think I said in the first meeting that we're a cut-through town full of cut-through streets. And I wish my recommendation was to establish a policy to address these things. That was a good recommendation.
I have 1 minute just for peace of mind.
I guess you could, yeah. It may help me have peace of mind, too.
Maybe it won't. My name is Jerry Tower. I've lived at 157 Quinnipiac Road for 23 years.
Yes, sir.
So I've been there quite a while. When you look at this study, a couple of things came to my mind. One is there was concern about the traffic light at the corner of Frank Smith and Wolf Swamp, the blinking light.
Right.
If you look at this study, the impact is it may delay traffic by a total of 1 second.
Right.
Okay, so it was a good point brought up by Mr. Gould and the rest of you. What is the impact at that intersection? I think they've answered that here. One other point that really jumped out at me was during peak hour, I think it was 5 to 6 or 4 to 5, they said a street our size should carry approximately 30 vehicles. Ours carries 212 vehicles during that hour. So if speed bumps is the answer and it drops it by 30%, to some of my neighbors' points, I mean, that would drop it down to 150, 160 cars in an hour. And this report is saying that the norm is probably 30. We have new apartment buildings or condos, I'm not sure which they are, which will be being built off of Maple Road in Enfield. That's traffic that will definitely increase on our street, no doubt. We have the new Bay Path Bay Path College University building a site over by Milton Bradley. I have a feeling that is going to increase. And the other thing is we are tucked into the corner of town. So the people that cut through our street are not residents of Long Meadow, okay? I would bet you 95% of them are people who are either in Enfield or Wilbraham or East Long Meadow or whatnot. I'm not saying that puts aside the other cut-through problems we have in town, but we're in the corner and they are not residents of Long Meadow driving down our street, okay? And then the last point I wanted to make, if we're going to set a policy, and I think the committee should, I think it's a good recommendation on the part of the Pioneer Valley consulting firm to make that statement that we should have a policy, maybe as a way of setting policy, it's a trial basis to maybe close a street and see what impact it has and what the results are and what you get for comments from other, and just put it that way as this is part of our way of studying what our policy should be going forward and what impact certain things may have. So, but again, I think the big thing is 30 cars per hour versus 212. okay? I mean, you can't cross the street. It's like crossing I-91. It's ridiculous, okay? So, my point, well, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, sir. The purpose tonight, comments?
Yes. But if you're saying the purpose is something, maybe you ought to go first if my point would be moot based on what you're saying the purpose is.
It was my impression the purpose tonight was to review the PPC report. This is the first time the board has had the opportunity to sit and even remotely discuss it. And I understand we've had it was issued November 21st. And contrary to popular belief, this select board does deal with a lot of paperwork and a lot of issues. And as you mentioned, the restraints on our communication is almost unbelievable. So we have had this is the first opportunity this board has had to be able to discuss this, period, legally. And it's not been discussed any other way. I feel that we're having a discussion, and I understand the residents want some quick action, and I don't think it can guarantee quick action. My recommendation is that since we've had a discussion, we think about this individually and come back, we'll schedule in our next meeting, in which, we'll take a motion to do some action. Now, that's my recommendation. If there's a motion for some action tonight, certainly the chair will entertain the motion and we'll vote on it. But I think we've been able to hear the residents again tonight. We've been able to hear select board members voice opinions on this. And that's my opinion only, so. Go for it.
Well, I mean, I guess I have a few reactions to this study. I guess I'm with Mr. Rosen in sort of my synthesis of the report, which is seemed like the only two viable options, according to the study, was speed humps or road closure. I was very much in favor of the speed humps option as something to try. To me, this is a process of experimentation. 30% effect one place may be a greater a number in a different place, or it could be less. The concern, though, that I had was the sort of practicality of it, because if we put it down temporarily, the temporary speed humps are very expensive. Paradoxically, it seems that the permanent ones are less expensive. They're $2,000. So I look at that, maybe if you just put up 2 speed humps, that's enough of a deterrent so that you're dampening speed, because again, like what we were saying before, the people who are cutting through don't have it in for Quinnipiac. It's a means to an end. And if you make it a little less desirable, then maybe that works. But of course, the problem then is, so I was kind of thinking of sort of a graduated response. Do something less drastic and move up to something more drastic if the less drastic measures did not take hold. But the problem is that the most economically viable part of this is permanent. We'd have to put this $2,000 speed bumps down, and then we'd have to remove them. Whereas the temporary road closure does have the advantage of being able to do it and then remove it. So that's, I think that's one thing. I mean, as to the question of policy, I think policies are good, but they're only going to take us so far. I suspect every time that we're faced with this, no matter what the policy is, it's going to be stated generally. They're going to be talking about different factors to consider. But in every instance, we're going to have to make a very fact-specific determination. I don't think the policy, I think even if we had a policy, I don't think it would be any easier. I mean, I guess as to the question of safety, I mean, I guess, I heard at least one person talk about an accident on Quinnipiac Road. So to me, that's data. What you do with that data, or what conclusions you draw from it, people can disagree with it. But I mean, to me, that's data, and it ought to have been considered. And then I guess this sort of goes to the assumption behind the report. Another assumption behind the report is sort of how they take speed. So, we're always looking at the 85th percentile. Well, I mean, I've observed this on my street. I've seen this on other. Sometimes people who are cutting through, going from one town to another, they're taking off at a very high rate, because they don't really care that much about this community or this town. And even if it is in the 95th percentile, those are things that we ought to take into account. And that's one of the problems I have with this study, is the assumption that we should only be looking at the 85th percentile, because if those 95th percentile folks are creating extreme hazards and running people over or creating the accidents that we've heard about, then that's something we ought to look at and not dismiss it. So I guess what it leads up to me is, to me, whatever we're doing now is an experiment. We're trying to see we're going to try something, we're going to see what happens. And given that the road closure option can be sort of turned on and turned off easily, I'm going to make a motion to adopt the original recommendation of the town manager, which is to have a temporary road closure. I can't remember how long he said, but what I'm going to propose is 6 months. And then we review it. That could have been what you said, I can't remember, but 6 months, and that we go back, we look at what the experience is, and then, we determine, whether to continue with that.
Is that your motion?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so is there a second
I
on the
don't think
motion?
I was that specific on the time. I think I was going to defer to the board, but I think 6 months is appropriate. I would maybe go till August 31st, 2015, so you can capture summertime traffic.
What are you capturing? The road's closed.
The impact around it. The impact of the...
Okay, okay.
6 months is fine. I won't,
I mean, one day.
I won't belabor the point.
You understand, we're closing the road. That's not a trial. That's not an experiment. That's a finite action. Okay? Okay, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. We're trying like this is a trial thing. That's not a trial thing. That's the end result that you would do that. But is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Second the motion. Okay, you were in discussion. Yes.
Wait. What was the motion?
What was the motion?
Okay, it was a motion to have a temporary road closure of Quinnetuck Road for 6 months.
That was it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No,
I just want to ask
we'll let the board talk.
No, I
first.
just want to ask a clarifying question.
Yes, sir.
On the motion.
Yes, sir.
To reopen after 6 months, or to be reevaluated after 6 months?
What are you going to reevaluate? I'm serious. You already know that the intersection, by this report, the intersection can take it.
Just seeking a clarification.
But I mean, there's no clarification here. Folks, you have to understand, this is not a maybe. This is a positive action. You don't get to saw the hand back on after you've chopped it off. This is a very positive action. This report specifically talked about traffic calming measures. In no place in this report did they say close the highway as an experiment. Their recommendations were to go for traffic calming. And that usually is the first action that you do, is traffic calming. What we're proposing is not traffic calming. I just want to make sure the board's aware of that. This is a finite action. Obviously, you can tell the way I'm talking. I'm in favor of getting the traffic calmed down on Quinnetuck, but I'm not in favor of closing a road and saying, well, we did our due diligence, because that's not due diligence. There's no action there. You just close the road. Boom, traffic goes down to whatever your local traffic is. End discussion. And to open it back up, I don't know how you would ever open a road back up. If you did, why did you shut it in the first place? Because you didn't prove anything. There was no analysis of any interim measures. It sounds like Stephen and I are having a debate, but it's not. I guess I'm talking to myself. Yes, Mark.
I'm listening because I agree with you. I think, Alex, one of the things you said is you believe in graduated response, and I don't think this allows for graduated response. I think that, I could just statistically saying, well, first let me say that we had an analogous, not similar, but an analogous situation in the roads opposite the high school around the morning, what I'll call rush hour and afternoon pickup time. And when that happened, a group of people met. It never came to the select board, and the roads were made one way during certain times of the day. My presumption is, since nobody's in here screaming at us, it seems to have done the trick. And the fact is that I'm surprised that since the town manager and the DPW and safety committee could have done that unilaterally, I'm very much surprised it didn't take the same approach on Quinnipiac, just kind of come to the town and announce, here's what we're doing, and we're putting up similar signs. I mean, those signs, you got to stop and take 10 minutes to read the signs because it says one way at certain hours of the day, but it works. And I certainly think that a gradual response would work. And getting back to what I was saying, I'm going to get to originally, is if in fact we believe statistics that said one way cuts down half the traffic. I mean, traffic's only going to go one way. And speed bumps reduce the traffic by 30% or to 70% of the current traffic. So if you put in speed bumps and a one-way street, you're down to literally 70% of 50%, or you're now at 35% of the current traffic level. And to me, that's getting down to the level of something that the town ought to be able to survive with. And Alex, I understand the concern that temporary speed bumps are expensive, but I think closing the road has other impacts, and if we're all concerned, and especially because of the winter and plowing, I'd say let's put in permanent speed bumps, and you know what, if we don't like them, you take out permanent speed bumps because, we're just putting down pavement. I mean, we're not talking about re-engineering the road at this point, which would be literally put the base of the road and really redo the road, but literally put down a more permanent speed bump. So I'm going to vote against the road closing because I think we haven't tried some graduated responses, which I think we should do, and I don't believe that the costs are something, the difference between temporary and permanent speed bumps ought to stop us from trying speed bumps first, or even speed bumps in conjunction with a one-way street.
You did mention, I think I want to reiterate something, though, that when we first presented this, we went through all of these things. Our town engineer, who is civil engineer, our DPW director, who is responsible for the plowing of the streets, our police chief, who's responsible for all the people in this town who do this work, went through all of these things. And our recommendation, based on our knowledge of all this stuff, was clear. And as I said, I think, the only reason I say that is because you mentioned snow plowing. I promise you, speed bumps are 10 times worse for snow plowing than closing a road. And we went through that conversation. And I guess like I said, we made a recommendation. We went to the extra study of Pioneer Valley. I'm not sure I still fully understand yet what the objection to closing the street is, other than precedent. And that's where I go back to the issue of some kind of guidance for the board and the town government in the form of a policy or a bylaw going forward that shows what factors you need to consider when making these decisions, and that helps mitigate the precedent thing. But those things we evaluated them internally and didn't see them as viable in terms of cost, in terms of maintenance, and then for the overall bang for your buck in terms of reducing the traffic. And I think the report from Pioneer Valley, to me, affirmed our thought process anyway. And I just, like I said, I'd rather have us, go through the policy process and study it further than take a half measure that's going to be worse, not better.
But if I could respond, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
The concern is that there's no opportunity to identify if something other than closure will work if the first step you do is closure. And that's kind of where I was, 2 months ago when this first came to the select board, and that's where I remain. I think that, closing a road, we will have a parade of people in here asking that their roads be closed, and it gets very, very difficult to stop people from closing roads after you've agreed to close a road. And you can say, we can't argue then, as we may argue now, that Quinnipiac is unique and we're going to get all kinds of issues. I mean, I'd love to see us develop a policy on, on traffic calming policy, but I think even then, if we've got 300 or 400 roads in town, we're going to end up with 300 or 400 evaluations against that policy. And so I'm not sure the policy becomes really functional until you actually study each road and see how it applies to the policy. Stephen, I hear you, I understand what you're saying, but sometimes, there's other reasons for taking some actions, and they're not all a strict, we think this is the best engineering solution.
No more. Okay, we had a motion. I'm just going back. We had a motion for closure, and we had a second. Was there an amendment to that motion? Okay, no amendment to the motion, just discussion. Marie?
I wanted to go back to process and procedure. If someone's actually going to close a street in town, they go in front of the planning committee. They really don't go in front of the select board. The only reason this has come in front of us is because it was a temporary, and other than that, it usually is a planning board decision.
To Mark's point exactly, I expressed to the residents of Quintuck Road that I do not support a permanent closure of the road and circumventing the process of giving our town engineer and our traffic committee the opportunity to look at what the impact of that would be, hence the original recommendation. Because, as Mark noted, sometimes just the cleanest decision that the residents want based on an engineering thing or something like that isn't always the greatest good for the greatest number. It's not always the best public policy decision. They can do that. And Mark makes the joke all the time about coming together with a bylaw to the planning board about making everybody paint their house purple. I think it's it's an extrapolation, but you could make it that folks from Ellington Road are going to come forward to the planning board and say we want to close our road, but then the people downstream are going to have the chance to protest that to the planning board, just like if the folks from Quinnipiac want to do it. But that's a permanent action. That is amending the map permanently. We wanted to do it temporarily. We wanted to work with them to see it temporarily.
Okay, so my point is that this temporary closure of 6 months, at any point in time, the planning board can take over, or the people can petition the planning board to make it permanent. But right now, this is bypass the planning board. But whenever we talk about process, procedure, or closure, it really is a planning board issue, not a select board issue, except for this instance where we're trying to do something a little different. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
And to me, the reason you do it is they reserve the right to petition the planning board.
Yes.
I think doing it this way says that if it turns into a disaster in the first 10 days, then it makes the case much stronger to keep, even if they do petition the planning board, for the town to say, make the case at least to the planning board or the town meeting, this is really going to have doing this permanently is going to have a very negative effect on traffic patterns elsewhere in the town. We don't know that for sure yet. And we don't know it because there's not, for all the reasons I talked about weeks ago, about no clear pathways. Unlike the streets that run perpendicular along Meadow Street, like Westmoreland and Ellington, all those streets, you know where the traffic's going to go if you close one of those streets. It's going to go the next street up. Here, because they're in the corner of town, it's not as clear. So doing it temporarily either builds or undercuts the case that could be made to the planning board, and I just felt it was responsible public policy to do that as I guess experiment is really kind of a clumsy word for it, but as an analysis, so when they went to petition, which they're in the rights to do, we could at least say, here's what's going to happen if you do that permanently. And I feel like that's good information to know. If we don't want to do that, they can still go to the planning board and we can have all these same arguments at the planning board and then at town meeting.
Thank you.
Enough discussion on that. Any more? Paul, you haven't said anything.
I'm listening, man.
Okay. I'm gonna. Yes, sir.
Go ahead. If you can call the vote.
No, I'm not going to call the vote. I was after I spoke. If you'd like to speak.
If I could.
Go ahead.
There's two things. On the agenda, you have review PVPC report.
Right.
Okay. So I just like to know going forward that if we're going to have a vote on something, that we be notified that there actually would be a motion, and just going forward.
So noted.
Secondly, I could be 100% wrong, but I thought the outcome of that meeting that we had, the last meeting where we talked about Quinnipiac, was we directed the town manager to come back to the board with specific recommendations in the traffic calming measures, and as opposed to a shutdown of the road. And I could be mistaken, but if I am, please tell me, remind me of that. But I thought that's what we were going to talk about tonight with the PVPC letter. The issue that I have is, this says review, it doesn't say vote, but if we're going to do that, that's fine. The bigger issue is that it isn't, you're never going to reopen the road. And And that's fine, if the purpose is to really get it to be permanent closure, I would rather have the planning board act on it so that the residents can be heard. If they are the ones that can close it permanently, then they're gonna see the same facts. I would rather see the motion be amended that it's not a 7-month window to look at whether or not this makes sense, because I think, to your point, Stephen, you're gonna know in the first week or not whether it works or it doesn't work. And it's gonna work in the sense of there's gonna be a lot of traffic going down and then turning around and coming back. And then once that's over, there will be no traffic in Quinnipiac other than the residents or their deliveries or, that type of thing. So I don't think you need a 7-month window. I'd rather see a 2-month window that says started on January 1st, ended on February, or come back on February 28th. Here's the data for we don't need 6 months worth of data for Wolf Swamp or Frank Smith, the intersection, because we're going to see the direct effect within the next few days. And then after that, if there is an alternate route that does not come down Frank Smith to Wolf Swamp, you'll know it within the first week or two. I think 7 months is way too much time, because it's either going to make sense to close it or not close it if we're not going to entertain the other issues, which were, as the report said, make it one way. If there's 1,800 cars a day and that drops it down by half, and speed bumps drop it down by more or whatever, we're not going to entertain those ideas, because those were the recommendations I thought we were going to look at. Then call it, but I think that the window's too long, and see, you're going to know within 2 weeks what's going to happen up there, I think.
Yeah, I'm going to speak next, Murray. Town manager, you've already spoken.
I just want to address it one point, and that is I agree with you, except for seasonal variations, Wolf Swamp Fields, Field Club, Twin Hills, those types of things are not being used right now as extensively as they were. And that's the only thing you'd want to capture is the seasonal variations. That's all.
Right. I agree. The purpose of this was to review the PVC report and not make a decision tonight. It was a review and get it in and get this discussion going. But there is a motion in place. I totally agree. I think we have failed. I think we're failing the community in this case to not implement traffic calming procedures to get the impacts. That's the purpose of this study. The study basically gave us some recommendations, and we're going to go away from those recommendations. We're not following this study. We're not following what the people said. We can throw this in the trash. It's worthless right now because we're not following what this report said. So I think we're failing the community. If they're looking at us for advice, and we went out and we got the report, now we throw the report out and won't even attempt to do traffic calming and show the impacts. That is what we're supposed to do, to show the impacts. We have data in front of us, and I totally agree. Once you shut that road, there's going to be no justification. What could possibly be the justification to reopen it? There's no justification to reopen it. We already know we have the engineering data. We already know the intersection will take it. That was one of the prime things that we wanted to find out. Will the intersection? Well, that's proven. Engineering data says that intersection, the level of service will be untouched. So we already have that answer. I don't imagine that it's going to change. But I think if we go for closure instead of going for the interim measure, we failed in our responsibility. I personally think we failed in our responsibility to the community by at least trying to do the minimum effect before we take a road from public service and turn it basically into a private road. That's my last, Maureen.
Well, I guess I would say by reading the report, I looked at the numbers, and the numbers they're giving me, I don't think calming's going to get us anywhere close to where the report says the road should be. And that's why I'm going to jump to the closure rather than the calming, because the calming's just going to go, instead of from a disaster, it'll just be a catastrophe.
Okay,
It'll still be occurring. But so I guess that's why I'm not going that way. But in the regards to the 6 months, I think that brings us to the May meeting. And I feel at one point in time the planning board's going to be stepping into this, and then we'll have a larger community discussion that will be occurring.
Okay,
so that's it.
As I said, you've chosen not to follow this report then, so you basically said that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you're going to go closure, I think the planning committee should be in there right now. I think, because I'm not naive enough to think we're going to reopen that road if we close it. I think that is an extremely naive decision or impression this board is making to themselves. And I just don't believe it. And I don't think anybody up here at this table believes that. So I guess I have to be honest about this. So. Okay? Okay, Mark?
Yeah, just a comment about the way we're running things tonight in general, and or tonight specifically, but in general. It seems to me that the select board is now running meetings by who can get the first motion in and what we do, rather than coming to a consensus. And it really concerns me a lot that instead of talking things through and identifying where there's a consensus and where we might reach agreement, we're getting to an early motion, and then we end up debating a motion which may be not necessarily a consensus position. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. I don't know, but I do agree with you, Richard, that our goal was for calming, not closure. The motion is to close it, which is truly, Mr. Rubin, we could have done that months ago, rather than go out for a Pioneer Valley Planning Commission report that says try calming. So I too am going to vote against this.
Okay, I'm going to call a question. All in favor of temporary closure on the road? 2, all opposed? Okay, motion fails. So I think I'm going to leave this report
Richard,
as... Yes, sir.
Could I make another motion?
Absolutely.
I would move to address Paul's point, because he seemed to be in favor of a shorter period, for a temporary road closure of Quinnetuck Road for 2 months.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, second for discussion. I think we've had a lot of discussion. So I guess we could just call for a vote, call the question. All in favor of the 2-month closure? There's no other alternative to this. This is just a motion to close for 2 months. Okay, so all in favor to close for 2 months? All opposed? Okay. I've got a feeling that we would be... Yes, sir.
We're going to go down this road. I'm going to make a motion that we direct the town manager to implement traffic calming studies short of road closure, including consider one-way and speed humps, and leave that to the safety committee in the town and the town manager. Even though that's not your original recommendation, that's the directive. Would be the directive of the select board.
Well, let's hold off on that, because I believe that the...
No, why can anybody else make a motion, but I can't? I don't. Stephen, I understand your reluctance to do this, but at some point, if it's the will of the select board that we do traffic calming, I think that the town ought to implement it.
I don't believe that's the role of the select board, and it would be more something like go back and study the issue and make a recommendation that we can consider, and that's what we've done. And Mark, you're putting us in a position to recommend something or try something that we don't think is the right approach for this issue. Now, if you want to ask me to go back at it again with the traffic committee in light of the information we've received for Pioneer Valley and see if we feel differently about it, absolutely we'll do that.
Are you saying that the board has no authority to close that road?
Road closure is a select board thing simply by virtue of, because that was the measure,
right.
that was the recommended measure. And I guess we could argue all day if road closing is considered a traffic calming measure. I think my reading of the PVPC report is that they viewed that as a traffic calming option. So I didn't dissect it where there's traffic calming and then there's closing a road. I kind of looked at it in the mix of options.
Right.
But I did check with the town council on this matter, and to close a road really should be a select board action like you would for a block party. That was the kind of, as I started off originally, it was kind of sort of like a block party closure, but there really isn't a precedent for it. Again, the road can always be closed through planning board means and a town meeting vote outside the select board's authority at all, other than passing through the petition to the planning board. And I thought, since that option is out there, shouldn't we really take the chance to look at how that would impact if the residents were agreeable to that? And like I said, we're not going to do that. That's fine. Let's move on.
So that means that you're saying, so therefore nothing will be done.
What I'm saying is I will meet again with the traffic committee. Richard's right, we did not meet again and review the report and how we feel about its recommendations or findings. We can go back at it and see if there's a different traffic calming measure that we feel would be effective, and report that back to the board.
Okay, but the board is tasked with the acceptance of this report. Is that correct?
It's not really accepting the report. It's just, you don't have to accept it if you don't want to. It's been made.
Right.
Pioneer Valley's not going to take it back if you don't
No, I
accept
know
it.
they're not going to take it back, but I mean, we could.
We paid for it.
Right. But I'm trying to get the procedural order here.
The original thing here was, we brought it to the board because we were recommending a road closure, and under the same heading of block party, that is a board vote.
Right.
As you noted, traffic calming things we can do administratively. And that's been the disconnect on this. And we can go back and look at it and continue to meet with the residents, and at the same time they can go do what they think they need to do with the planning board.
Okay.
We can go through all of that. But it's not, I mean, you know, the traffic calming improvements aren't budgeted. I mean, they're not planned for. I mean, that's an operational thing.
They weren't budgeted and planned for opposite the high school either, but we somehow did them.
But we didn't vote on it.
Clearly, we didn't vote, but here's something we've been asked to vote on. We've taken several votes now over the course of several meetings, Marie, because it's come down to either we vote to close the road or nothing happens, apparently.
Or you can develop a policy. Or you can develop a policy that identifies traffic calming measures.
But why
that you
can't we
agree
do
with.
something while we're developing a broader policy? Take some action to give some relief. It may not be every bit of relief the residents want, but we give them some relief in the interim while we're working on, and I'm not saying don't develop a policy. It's probably fine to develop a policy. The point is, well, we could end up spending 3 months developing a policy. Meanwhile, nothing's getting done. And I'm saying, just like we did stuff without a policy, took action without a policy opposite the high school, I'm suggesting we take some action without a policy. I don't know what it would take to reverse what was done across from the high school. I don't know what it would take to reverse this actions done here on Quinnipiac. But the residents have asked for temporary, immediate relief, not just to put it off. And I'm saying, we'd like you to give them temporary, immediate relief. I know you don't necessarily agree. It may not be the long-term relief while we're developing a policy, but that was the purpose of my motion. And to say you don't agree with my motion is fine, but we haven't even asked to see if there's a second to the motion.
Well,
okay, hold on. I think I know you were next. I'm trying to keep track.
Okay, so I'm going to make a motion.
Well, there's already a motion on the table.
I didn't hear
I
what it was.
didn't know if Mark was allowed to make that.
I didn't. Yeah, I didn't know if
clarify that.
Okay.
Actually, I didn't know.
Repeat your motion, please.
Yeah.
Taken care of.
I made a motion that the select board direct the town manager and the town safety committee to take some interim relief to implement traffic calming measures, including such items as one-way or speed humps on Quinnipiac Road.
Second.
Okay, there's a second and a motion discussion.
Okay, so my discussion is, I think, I'm in line with this. I mean, given that the motion for a temporary road closure has failed, that we have a directive that a total of 2 to 3 permanent speed humps, as indicated in the report, be put on Quinnipiac Road as a traffic calming measure. So I guess I would attempt to amend the motion to be more specific as to what we're telling the town manager and to do.
No, Marie was raising her hand, but
so that's my motion. So that's my amendment to the motion.
Your amendment to the motion, and and it was seconded. And your amendment to the motion was
to direct the town manager to implement 2 to 3 speed humps on Quinnipiac Road.
Okay. Marie?
I'm speechless because we're the select board. That's the power. The people that are experienced in this, the public safety, DPW, should sit down and we should tell them, we'd like to know what the recommendations are for specifically this road, short of closure. But for us to say, we want this done, I just feel as if...
We actually did vote that.
I know.
And that's
I
that's
disagree.
exactly
We did.
what we voted.
I think that we're doing a par-way measure, and not only that, we're doing a faulty measure because it should go to the public safety in deciding what's the best way. Now we say 3 speed bumps because one person put the motion out. Someone else says, oh, one way. Someone else says, well, we should have one way at one time, one way at another. I mean, there are multiple ways, and all of this is just going to chisel it down 30%, 10%, 30%, 40%. Let's let someone let our experts look at it, and the people who are in charge of operations come up with a recommendation. For this board to suddenly come out and decide how this road's going to be taken care of, I think it's really out there, and this is the problem with this select board being given issues to deal with, because then all of a sudden we drill down and we're the experts on it.
Okay.
I'm totally disagree with both motions. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mr. Gold.
Yeah, Marie, other than your last 3 words there, I agree that I don't think it's the role of the select board to direct the details of this, but I do have to state that I thought that it was not that long ago at our first meeting where we said, come back with something other than road closure, and what we got was, no, road closure. And so my motion was intended to say, please implement something, not just come back with a recommendation other than road closure. Please implement something than road closure. And I'm not going to presume to tell you whether it's speed bumps, what the signs say, whether it's one way or 2 ways, or certain hours or not certain hours, or 2 speed bumps or 22 speed bumps. But I'd like to see something, then that was the purpose of my motion, to set in place some traffic calming actions. I happen to disagree with the specifics of 2 to 3 speed humps because I don't want it limited to that as much as I think that those will do wonders. I think there's probably other things that might happen, and you might decide you want 1 speed hump and 2 or 3 other chicanes or something like that. So, Alex, I'm going to vote against the amendment, but still for the main motion.
If I could just make a comment. The directive or the purpose of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission was not, it was to have them look at the issue and have them look at the pros and cons of different traffic calming measures. It wasn't bring back something besides closure. It was, what about all these other things that we had considered internally but didn't obviously report on our internal deliberations thoroughly enough for the board's satisfaction. The reason why this got here is because it takes a select board vote to close the road for long-term, even for a day. We didn't bring this here to have the select board to say, tell us what the best way to deal with Quinnetuck Road is. That is our job. And this entire process has played out in a manner that the board just simply hasn't liked what the administration has had to say about this. That's not really the administration's problem, but this wasn't help us problem solve Quinnetuck Road. It was, we need your approval to do what we think is the best thing to do. And so to say, go back and come back with something else, that's fine. I'm happy to go back. Like I said, the idea of a policy I think is a good idea. I didn't come in here and say we're back to road closure. As you recall, the first thing I said was I think the idea of getting to that point by virtue of the policy and development process is not a bad idea. But we can certainly go back, sit down, look at the report, look at the findings, see if we change our mind. But that's not how this is supposed to work. And to say, because we may conclude that all these options are worse than doing nothing. From a traffic standpoint, a safety standpoint, a plowing standpoint, all these reasons, we may get to the point where we feel, as the people charged with making these evaluations, that doing nothing is better than doing permanent speed bumps. And that's why I'm not comfortable with the idea of being given a directive to do something. Because, like I said, the board has rejected the recommendation of the people who do this for a living. And that's fine. That's within the board's discretion to reject it. But I don't command us to change what we think is the best thing simply because you didn't like it.
I got to respond to that, Stephen. I hear you. I heard you loudly and clearly. I think I heard you a month and a half ago when this first came up. The point was, though, it's not the pleasure of a majority of the select board to support that recommendation.
That's fine.
And so, but to have an answer be, but we think nothing is better than if you're not going to close the road, then nothing's better than whatever's next. You're saying we may conclude all these options are worse than doing nothing. That's what you just said.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, by issuing a directive, we're letting you off the hook. We're saying to you, don't worry, if it's a dumb mistake to do something other than nothing and not a road closure, it falls on us, not you. You're not the ones who said, well, gee, we didn't want to do this. No wonder how terrible these speed bumps are, this one-way signs are, or whatever it is you do. You're off the hook by doing it. And I think that at some point, there's a situation where the select board can say, we've got an issue in the town, we heard your recommendation, we don't accept the recommendation in its entirety, and we'd like an alternative chosen, your next best alternative. As lousy as you may think that next best alternative is, we're not only asking you, we're directing you, go for that next best alternative. And I think that's what the people in the street have said. I don't think they'd agree that doing nothing that all the options are worse than doing nothing. I'm not sure they'd agree with that. And I think they'll be back in here saying, we're going to do something else. And so to that extent, that's why I think this motion was put in place, because had something been done and said, look, we tried this, and now the residents don't even like this, and we tried that, and the residents didn't like this, and oh, by the way, both things we tried, but the only two pieces of data we have are status quo and total road closure. We have no data in between other than engineering studies that say speed bumps will do this, one way will do this, but we're saying let's do something. At least that's my approach to this. Let's do something.
Okay. I keep coming back to the report. And the exact words said, prior to the implementation of any transportation improvements or traffic calming measures, PBC would like to recommend the town of Long Meadow develop a formal traffic calming policy. They made recommendations, and I don't know why we are unwilling to follow the recommendations of a lead agency. And I'm talking about everyone, including town manager, including this board. I mean, they made a recommendation to us.
But I'm fine with following that recommendation. The problem is the timeline. That recommendation could take 3 to 6 months to come up with a policy.
And it could. And you can read in this report, I mean, they're basically saying you just don't willy-nilly go out and do things. And I'm sure that if we had them here, they would say tonight that they start with the lowest probability measure and see what the impacts are and move it up to the progressive. We know the end result will be to close that road. I don't think anybody disputes that. And that's 100% control once we close it. But we don't know if we'll get 60% reduction. We have no idea. Nationally, 30% reduction with speed humps. But we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what it's going to be on Quinnipiac. No, we've had discussion with the audience.
You can't pay right now.
We've had discussion with the audience. We can put temporary humps in there. They're very available, which I think would be good for staff anyway, because we can use them other places in town. But I would recommend that, Stephen, I understand your point too. Your point's well taken. But I keep looking back on the fact that if this board is going to set policy, and we have a report in front of us that states from an agency that we all said we would go to get advice, and now we're not going to follow their advice, then I would question what policy we are setting. I mean, I would hope that collectively we could get together as a group and iron this out pretty doggone quick.
I would happily draft, I'd work with the traffic committee and Pioneer Valley to create a draft policy in accordance with the Pioneer Valley's planning committee recommendations, planning commission recommendations.
Right. But would you see anything wrong with, as of next week, instituting traffic calming measures on Quinnipiac, going out and getting the temporary speed ramps and putting them in? And that way, when you're forming this, you've also got an immediate data. It's almost like taking a traffic count. You've got reliable traffic counts. You could even put one speed hump in and then follow up with a second temporary.
We can review it again, but
okay.
We reviewed all of this, and the clear measure that worked the best was the one we recommended. We can go back and look at it and with the fact that it's not acceptable to the board, and revise the recommendation. We can do that, but I'm not comfortable saying, yeah, temporary speed humps are the way to go without going back and reviewing the information with the traffic committee.
Well, I'm not asking you to make a quantum leap. I was asking you for parallel actions.
Yeah.
While you
Yes.
implement the recommendations in the report.
Yes, we can do. Yes, we can take parallel actions.
Okay.
So on one hand, we can be working on a policy, and on the other hand, we can go back and look at this specific situation.
And then for the benefit of the residents on Quinnipiac, we would be doing something immediately, or we would look like we would do something immediately to start gaining data.
The something being, we would see what the next best
Well,
option.
for
if any
instance,
is.
if you put 2 speed humps up there and you walk back to this group and you say it only reduced traffic by 10%, then I think we have our answer. Then there's only one other thing you can do is to select it one way with speed humps, and after that, the answer is pretty clear. If you're down to 1,600 vehicles a day, and if people are going to put up with it, then we know it's not going to work. You can't turn the entire street into speed humps.
I'd want to put a little more thought into it than just doing that, but we certainly can have that discussion. I'd want to get back with Pioneer Valley and the traffic committee and go and use their many years of all those people in the rooms, many years of experience in doing this stuff, to say, okay, well, what's our next best option?
Right, and I
which
would,
is what you're asking for, Mark, right? Yeah. What's the next best?
Yeah, I would seriously believe if the recommendation is going to come back that strong from Pioneer Valley Planning Commission and you together that you want to go for a road closure, that you just might as well go to planning with it. Because, you know, we're pushing the daylights out of this if we're saying we're going to go for a 4 or 5 month closure.
I just felt like, well, going back, the recommendation was so we could be informed of what the impact of that would be when it went to planning board.
Right, because I mean, that's new ground, we've never been there. We usually have 1-day closures, but we're talking about a pretty lengthy closure.
This is all new stuff, and that's what made it so challenging.
Yeah. Okay. No, do we have a motion on the table? Or motion on the table?
There's an amendment on the table.
An amendment, what was the?
It was amendment to implement 2 to 3 speed humps on Quinnipiac.
Okay, based on the discussion that we have just had with the town manager, would you be willing to withdraw your amendment to the motion?
No.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm saying this is I think most people watching this, I'm sure the residents of Quinnipiac would look at this and to say, because we can't do speed humps, we're going to walk away doing nothing, is they would conclude that government's not working. And I think we need to be specific. We've gotten the information from the report, and I think this is something that, again, this is all experimentation. So I'm not going to withdraw the amendment.
Okay, well, let's call the question on the amendment. The amendment was for X amount of speed humps.
To implement 2 to 3 speed humps.
Right, to implement 2 or 3 speed humps. All in favor of that motion? All opposed? Okay. 3-2-0. Because I pretty well stated my position was to go with the town manager on this.
So how did you vote on that?
I just didn't vote. I guess it's an
3 to
automatic
1 to
no.
1.
It's 3 to 1 to 1. Okay, so that motion, that was the amendment to the motion, and now the original motion was basically the same, wasn't it? Except yours was generic.
Right.
So basically, the motion is install 3 speed humps on Quinnipiac Road.
No. The amendment is to direct the town manager to install calming systems, including one-way or or speed humps, which has now been amended to install 2 to 3 speed humps, but to consider implementing traffic calming systems. So you can add other things to it. You can still make them one way and still put signage in there, according to the amendment.
Question on the voting.
Yeah.
Mr. Grant, Mr. Lantinella, Mr. Goldwald voted for the amendment.
Right.
Ms. Angelides voted opposed for it.
Okay, you can just put me as opposed in it. I guess I just didn't raise my hand. Go ahead and put me as opposed in it. Okay.
I thought you did raise your hand.
Well, I didn't because I pretty well stated my point, but I guess I should vote. Okay. The motion now, then I guess it's clear cut what it is. It's fairly generic. All in favor of the motion presented by Mr. Gold?
As amended.
As amended. Okay. All opposed? Okay, 3-2. And I explained my negative vote on this is the fact that I would like to ask the town manager to come back with us, but I think that will happen anyway. Okay.
Mark, email me that. Please.
Naming policy.
Wait, we didn't do the liquor license hearing.
Oh, we did.
Did we?
That's
It's not a
next.
hearing.
It's
not a hearing.
This new business.
Was it new business?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
No, I
not,
thought that was.
it's not a
Okay,
date,
one-
it's not a timed hearing, it's just,
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the other thing. My bad.
Okay, being the fact on that, why don't we jump agenda? Let's go to the annual liquor license.
Does that mean you're tabling the meeting?
No, I'm not going to table. I'm just going to change the agenda for this. I'll come back to the naming policy if we have time tonight. So we got the, I thought I had a whole list of those.
here, read them.
Yeah, well, here, somebody else usually reads them. We got.
Fine.
Mr. Foster?
I'll move we approve the, renew the liquor, move to approve the renewal of the liquor license for Bertucci's.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None? Okay.
I move to approve the renewal of the liquor license for the Clubhouse Cafe, which is the Franconia Golf Course.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All opposed, or all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
All five?
Unanimous.
Five,
Yeah.
yes. Fine. I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Four Seasons Wines and Liquors.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Grapevine Restaurant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'll move we approve the liquor license renewal for the Huki Lao Restaurant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none? All in favor? Aye.
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Iron Chef Restaurant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Lee Brothers Restaurant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Long Meadow Country Club.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for the Long Meadow Package Store.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Max Burger Restaurant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Rinaldi's Restaurant.
Second.
All in favor? Or, excuse me, any discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for the Bottle Shop.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Twin Hills Country Club.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
I'll move we approve the renewal of the liquor license for Umi Asian Bistro.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing no discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Gold.
Keep passing.
Okay,
So,
bond and just, pardon?
Alex, when you get done signing, I'll just keep putting it back in here.
Yeah. Paul, you want to come up on the bond anticipation note?
Hopefully this will be as easy as your liquor licenses. The town has a almost a $2.5 million bond anticipation notes that is due on December 18th. It consisted of 7 projects that had been previously authorized for debt. They are itemized in your November 21st correspondence that I sent you. For the public, they entail the water mains on Primrose, the fiber optic system for the town, sewer pump station on Emerson, water pump station on Forest Glen, drainage at Woodside, Williams, and Merriweather, the LHS high school project, building project here in the October of 2011 snowstorm. We will be paying down on a number of those bond anticipation notes, a small amount of the outstanding principal, and renewing 4 other new ones. We'll be paying down on 4. We're also adding to the amount on the Long Meadow High School to cover the last large payment that we made to the general contractor here. I'm sorry.
Where's that?
I'm sorry.
Where is that in here?
I don't know where it is in there, but
Because of what we have is we have LHS MSBA reimbursement from $1,180,000, band 618, addition $1,076,000, band 619, $2,256,000.
so what I'm sorry, I don't understand your question, Paul, when you say where is
You
it?
said there's the money for the high school, the overage?
Right?
No, it's not the overage, Paul.
Not the overage, it's cash flow.
That's, okay, that's.
Okay.
I thought you said it was the overage, okay.
No. This morning, we took quotes on bids for this ban renewal that will actually encompass 10 projects, 6 of the 7 that were previously mentioned, plus some other recent authorizations at town meeting. That total ban was $4.321133 million. We had 5 bids that came in this morning, ranging from 0.45% to 0.55%. Eastern Bank was the lowest bid at the 0.45%. We're recommending that the Eastern Bank be awarded the bond anticipation note for the $4.3 million at the 0.45% on all the projects. The other thing I just want to make note of this, you may notice that there are no bond reductions or pay downs to the water projects. We're doing that as a cost, as a measure to save some appropriations or some expenses on the water, within the water budget, because the water revenues are so they're down. It's estimated almost to be $300,000 by the end of the fiscal year. This will mitigate some of that. And it also correlates with a plan that was discussed within the subcommittee of the Select Board, the Finance Subcommittee of the Select Board. So that, again, will help mitigate some of that lost revenue at year end, so the year end results are not in a negative position. So I don't know if there's any further question. The October snowstorm ban will be fully paid off. We received probably back in October $393,000 in additional reimbursements. This $126,000 ban will be fully paid off, leaving us an amount that will go back into the general fund of about $276,000.
I have one question. One of the things being added to the new ban is the North Interceptor sewer design, and when we approved that project, that went, and also went to town meeting to be approved, and that's just the design work, is, I don't remember us discussing that would be a ban as opposed to be taken out of sewer rates or.
It was a bond it was a debt authorization that was voted on at the town meeting.
What I'm saying, when we approved it here, okay, so you're saying it was, because I don't recall it being a debt authorization when we approved it at the board level.
It was a debt authorization approved at town meeting.
But that doesn't answer your question.
No, he just did.
Yeah, she said that was a town meeting.
Correct. And I don't recall us discussing that it would be placed in a band. I mean, we're financing design work, and I know if there was a second part or third part of that project that we were going to, we know it's coming,
Right.
but we don't have that.
Right.
Well, at some point, the board would have had to authorize that because you control the warrant, so.
I think there's a difference between voting on a warrant that's in front of you with a project that was approved versus, but again, I'm mistaken.
Yeah, it's Article 11.
Yeah, oh, no, I know, yeah, I'm mistaken, that's right.
Any other discussion?
No other discussion. I'll make a motion that we authorize the issuance of a bond anticipation note in the amount of $4,321,133 to be issued at the bids based on the town treasurer and CFO received.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Mr. Grant?
Yeah.
Yes.
Second by Mr. Grant. Any discussion? No discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor? All opposed?
Right, Mr. Chair, I also have paperwork that if it could be signed, needs to get back. I will pass it around. But there are two pieces. The first, the top on this is a thing for the Department of Revenue stating that you had the public hearing on the tax classification. That is the top, and then there are a number of other signatures required on the bond issuance. So I will get those to you right now.
Okay. Do we have any subcommittee reports?
Yeah.
Mr. Gold does first.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had a meeting of the Finance Subcommittee, and there were a couple of recommendations. I just want to pull up the draft minutes, if you give me 1 second here, so that we have a record of that. So there were...
Here?
Yeah, start down there.
Left side.
Yep.
So we had a couple of things. One was that, and you heard it from Mr. Pasturzik, that we were recommending that the Select Board not reduce the water debt in December through the bond payment, and was just executed in this bond anticipation note. We did that because water usages are low, and we didn't want to, that debt payment was going to be taken from the Water Stabilization Fund, and it was felt that, was it Water Stabilization Fund, Paul, or
Water
Enterprise Fund? Water Enterprise Fund, and it would have brought the Water Enterprise Fund potentially down to a level that was below our target level, especially given reductions. We also, in talking about, though, in terms of the water and sewer issues, talking about water rates, there was a recommendation from a previous meeting that where the water rates might go in the coming year, and those will be, I think, brought forward into the Select Board next time we review water rates. But we actually looked at, I think it was 7 years going forward. I've got a chart here in front of me from 2013 through 2019, looking at Springfield water charges as best they've done and a projected water rate, and then looked at different payment schedules for debt services. And so I think that plan is going to come before the Select Board when sometime the next time we talk about water and water rates, and I think it's worth considering. And as a component of that, I think it's important to note that the Select Board also, the Finance Subcommittee was also recommending that the Select Board support a bylaw change at the 2015 annual town meeting that will allow water billing to include fixed and variable charges, and not just the current. It will be set by usage. That's in keeping with our forward look at what's happening with water rates. And finally, the Select Board, we're recommending the Select Board review the prior proposal for allowing the installation of a separate water meter dedicated to lawn irrigation. That was brought before the Select Board, I think, two and a half years ago. Now, and it was a proposal that the DPW Water Department had put together. A second water meter would be subject potentially to supplemental billing charge, but would not have a water charge, and that would not have a sewer charge. I'm sorry, and that would make things a little bit easier. That's something that residents have asked for from time to time through the last many years. We now have the technology to do it, and so we're suggesting that it be reviewed and considered also by the Select Board. We also had a very brief discussion about the 2015 budget, but primarily just being brought up to date on the status of the budget being presented to the town manager, I believe, the end of next week or the end of this week.
The 2016 budget.
The 2016 budget, I'm sorry. Yeah, but the 2016 budget first draft is going to be brought by department heads to the town manager shortly.
The 12th. Next week, the 12th.
Yeah, 12th, right? 12th of December.
Okay, you've rattled off several points. Could you give me a copy of that so we can make sure that what is appropriate becomes agenda items?
Sure, I'll do that.
Yes, Marie.
How did you guys do on the debt management policy?
Still,
That we're trying to-
I think it's ready to come back to the full committee.
Yeah.
We had some final corrections, and it never came back to the full committee after.
That's our
Oh, you mean to the full Select Board or to the subcommittee?
No, the full Select Board. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
Yeah.
Full-
Yeah,
But it is ready to come back.
It's ready to come back, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it, Mark?
Yeah.
Any other subcommittee reports? Marie? Ellen?
No.
What you guys?
We're waiting for a new
I'll give you a new.
a new request.
Okay, we have one other
Because we
piece.
did the naming policy.
Yeah, we have
Now
one
we're
other
waiting.
piece of business that we brought back on because the board has not taken action on it, was the draft on the Town of Long Meadow public property naming policy. This is, I think I'll entertain a motion for approval on this so we can get this thing under discussion, please.
I move we approve the town naming policy as presented.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion seconded. Discussion?
I'd like to,
Go ahead, Paul.
I don't, my concern is, or the only thing that I would request to change is that in the second paragraph, there's a line that says the suggestion shall be in writing. I would end it at that. And whether or not you state in the policy that it has to be placed on a select board agenda, I think that would be inferred. I don't necessarily like this line that says if it's coming from the public, it must be supported by 50 or more signatures, because the first line of that paragraph says suggestions for the naming of any property, including schools and so forth, should come to the select board through the town manager's office, so it can come from any member of the public. I think if someone's going to give us a suggestion for a name for whatever, in this example, I don't think they should be obligated to gather 50 signatures. That was my only suggestion. I think any suggestion has to come before the select board through the town manager's office, or directly, I guess, or however they want to submit it. But my only feeling is that I don't think I would require 50 signatures, because then you start getting into, I think, it almost becomes a citizen's petition, and I think it can be kind of confused with that. And I think that the first line says it should come to the select board. Any suggestions? Because if it's from the select board member, we wouldn't have to get 50 signatures. At least that's what I'm inferring from here.
Okay, do you want to propose that as well, you put the primary motion in.
Yeah, no, I put the motion up. I'm putting that out there for discussion.
Okay.
I think that policy, that whole paragraph should end right after it says it shall be in writing, because I think that if someone has the ability to give us a suggestion, 50 signatures or not, I think we should still consider it. That's my only.
I'm not opposed to what Paul is suggesting. I think it's a good idea. Any other comments?
Go ahead, Mark, if you want to go.
No, go ahead, Steve.
I think from a practical standpoint, the purpose of this should recognize with a formal name or title for historical, cultural, geographical memorialization or other purposes. And I think the bar should be, if 50 is too, maybe it should be 25, because 50 can be kind of a lot of signatures. But to me, for practicality standpoint, to go to Mark's house painting purple analogy, someone could say we should name a town building after, my buddy, my golf partner, whatever. And I think having it, you really want to demonstrate, well, for what that guy suffered, he should get something named after him.
I had 25 friends, I think.
Yeah. So I do think you have to have some kind of threshold criteria to get to basically say on paper and writing this person is important to more than just one person.
Okay.
But your point is very well taken.
No, my only point is then the select board member any select board member should be required to get 50 signatures too. I just think that if it's, just because you're sitting on a board doesn't mean you get a free pass.
Oh, I feel like that applied to the select board as well.
Okay.
No?
See, I kind of I read it. I guess so in that regard, Stephen, I have less concern of it. I would just, if the select board wasn't intended to be part of that.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm sorry.
Make
I see what you're saying.
Part of it.
Yes, Mary.
So I guess you could say the suggestion shall be in writing and must be supported by 50, 25, whatever, more registered voters of the town as evidenced by the suggestion. So you could just sort of combine those two lines.
Right.
But we worked off a group, a model that had come from other towns, and the towns all had this, and so I think that a threshold of some kind is important. And Paul, as you said, everyone should be under the same requirement,
Actually,
whether school committee or anything.
I'll withdraw my comment. We'll leave it. I think it's fine based on what you're talking about. I get it.
Yeah, because it did say on the motion of a select board member. It didn't say we get a bypass on it. And a suggestion shall be in writing.
Like I said, I read it one way.
Did you make a motion on that?
I just made a motion to approve. I didn't make
No,
an
he was just
amendment.
commenting.
That was just for discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, and further reading, I see your point.
Yeah, no, I'm almost set. That answers
Leave
my
it at
concern.
50?
I'm okay with 50.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just, I guess when we last saw this, which was some time ago, I guess I thought my comments were that I was looking for more guidance on the criteria as opposed to the procedure, you know, and so because what we've got here is the same thing we had before, and you know, and I think that criteria as a policy will help both the select board, if nothing else, give us coverage if we need it for saying no, but also help people in understanding you can't bring your guy. I don't care if you get 250 signatures, your golfing buddy isn't going to get a name. You know, if it's just because he's your golfing buddy or she's your golfing buddy. But it has to have some criteria as to, you know, and it can be general, that they've provided lasting contributions to the town of Longmeadow or historical perspective to the region or whatever it is. And that kind of coverage for criteria to me is an important part of the policy, as well as the procedure that it must go from here to there. And I'm hard pressed to tell you what those criteria are, but I'll know them when I see them.
I think to your point, Mark, is they do say historical, cultural, geographical memorization or other purposes. I think you want to leave it flexible in case there's some unusual. Usually when these things come up, it's something that is, you know, somewhat unusual, or, you know, something that you don't think of, and then all of a sudden you can't pay an honor to someone that everybody wants to do because it doesn't fit with the policy without amending the policy. I think, truthfully, the select board or the executive branch, we're charged with custody of the town buildings and town property. And so it is a subjective decision by the 5 members of the board who are serving at that time whether or not they want to do it. Right. And it's like any policy matter. I believe that not having one of these makes it so people will just start naming things and throwing signs up on things if they haven't already. But, you know, I view during the discussion about the person, those qualifications will be, you know, will emerge from the discussion, and you can have the motion can be, you know, whereas this person has done X, Y, and Z, you know, now we resolve to name this building after him or her. I think that if individual members aren't convinced that the person is noteworthy enough, you can vote against it, and then you're not voting against criteria, you're voting against just your judgment of it. And to your original point, we brought back the same one because I don't think anything really clear in terms of guidance and in terms of how this should be amended to satisfy the board. You know, I didn't write it, the subcommittee wrote it, but I don't recall getting any clear guidance in terms of how this should be amended to satisfy the board. That's why we brought back the same one.
Okay. Right.
I think we talked about criteria, and I know we had seen some of your recommendations, Mark, and we just decided could so easily be interpreted different ways that we didn't bother putting criteria in. We felt it was really up to the boards in the future, because it could go to a special event, to a historic, to a memorial, and it would really be the feeling of the community and the select board at that point in time. But that was my feeling, Alex.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think the point that I was making, we were discussing it, is if we're going to name a ball field or name a building, somebody, you kind of know it when you see it. You know, you're going to just, I mean, you know, to me, to sort of try to refine the criteria, you know, is sort of a pointless exercise.
Maybe a 2/3 vote. Maybe make it a 2/3 vote, so you know, instead of raising the criteria to be a 2/3 vote is required.
I'd make it a 3/5 vote if we wanted to do
that's
that,
right.
or, well, 4/5 vote or something.
A 4/5, a supermajority vote. I mean, that's just an option if you want, because if you don't want to be, you know, it's a foursome and the 4th golf buddy, the other 3 serve on the select board.
Well, yeah, it is said here you got a majority.
Where are you golfing that you keep bringing this up?
Yeah.
It's just a clue. Well, because the Twin Hills guy was here, and that's where it's been.
You said the naming of the policy shall require majority vote of the select board members present. So that could have been 3 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And 2 people. So yeah, I kind of agree. I'd like to see a little more protection put on this particular one, because these are certainly not emergencies. We have time to get the full board together. So Does anybody have suggested language?
I
so we
would
can-
make a motion to amend the vote to be a supermajority vote. So
Okay.
in the event there's not a select board member on the board and there's 4 members, it's 3 members. Because you can't say 4/5 if someone's off the board or in the hospital or something and you're doing it. So supermajority vote, which means more than just, it's got to be 4/5 or
Okay.
3/4 or whatever.
Second.
And that was an amendment to the motion.
Correct.
Okay, call a question on the amendment to the motion, or is there any discussion? I think we hammered it. Okay, I'm going to call a question on the amendment. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, let's go ahead.
That was on the amendment. Now we
That was
have the
on
motion.
the amendment to the motion. Now I'm going to bring the motion up. Is there any further discussion required on the motion? No? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, passed. Amended as
Yeah. The naming property shall require a supermajority vote of the select board members present.
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ladies and gentlemen,
We need to sign, I don't know where Paul's.
Second.
can we sign them off camera, or do we have to sign them off camera?
They're right here.
Okay, so we have some paperwork that we're going to sign, ladies and gentlemen, once the lights click out, but you won't miss anything. We're just doing it for our CFO. Appreciate everyone's attention tonight. Our next scheduled meeting, I believe, is December 15th. Is that correct? December 15th. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you there, and we wish good luck, really good luck to our Long Meadow football team at their Super Bowl and Saturday. Good night and have a nice evening.